Chapter 559. As Mel Gibson's agent, Ed L'Amato was very disappointed to see that his employer's first self-directed movie, The Faceless Man, only grossed a little more than $300,000 at the midnight box office. However, there was nothing he could do. Although the cost of the movie was less than $5 million, this was without taking into account Mel Gibson's personal net worth. For a Hollywood superstar who already had two blockbuster series, Crazy Mike Bruce and Lethal Weapon, Mel Gibson's salary was about $15 million. Although Ed L'Amato felt that Mel Gibson should focus on his career as an actor, at Mel Gibson's current level, as an agent, he had little influence over the actor, let alone control him. Ed L'Amato could only hope that the money tree in his hands would not continue to slack off. However, early this morning, when he saw the news in the entertainment section of the newspaper and received a series of calls from major film companies, Ed L'Amato's depression from the box office failure of The Faceless Man was suddenly swept away. After hanging up another call from a senior executive of Paramount, Ed L'Amato came to the door of Mel Gibson's luxury suite and hurriedly pressed the doorbell. As soon as the door opened, Ed L'Amato couldn't wait to enter Mel Gibson's suite. He ignored the figure of a woman who was hiding in the bedroom in a panic and raised the newspaper in his hand. "Mel, did Eric Williams' personal assistant look for you yesterday?" Mel Gibson was a little unhappy with his agent's abrupt intrusion. He frowned, took the newspaper from his agent, glanced at it and cursed, "These damn paparazzi, they can even find out what I said in the coffee shop." Ed L'Amato was just about to speak when the mobile phone in his hand rang. He made an apologetic gesture to Mel Gibson, walked to the balcony of the suite, and pressed the answer button. A moment later, he returned to the living room. Ed L'Amato said excitedly, "Mel, guess who just called?" Mel Gibson was leaning on the sofa in the living room, reading the newspaper that Ed L'Amato had just brought over. Hearing Ed L'Amato's excited tone, he said disapprovingly, "God." Ed L'Amato choked for a moment, but had no choice but to take the initiative to explain. "It's Michael Eisner, the CEO of Universal Pictures. Also, I've just received inquiries from Warner Brothers, Paramount and Fox. They're all CEO-level executives. Hee, these guys haven't been so polite to us in a long time." Mel Gibson was not stupid. He waved the newspaper in his hand. "It's about this?" "Yeah, Mel. Almost everyone in Hollywood knows that Eric Williams is interested in Braveheart. Didn't you receive a call?" Mel Gibson shook his head and looked at the unlocked bedroom door. Every minute of the night was worth 1,000 gold. How could he let these messy things disturb him? Ed L'Amato made an understanding expression and stopped worrying about these things. He asked, "Mel, what did Eric Williams' personal assistant talk to you about yesterday?" Mel Gibson waved the newspaper in his hand again. "Didn't you read it? Braveheart, the joint venture company set up by Firefly and MGM, is interested in investing in this project. Yesterday, Alan Fissman came over in person, and we talked about my thoughts on this movie." Ed L'Amato said, "What about Firefly? What kind of conditions did they offer?" Mel Gibson shook his head and glanced at the newspaper in his hand again. At this time, he was no longer angry about being secretly photographed. He also realized why his agent was so excited. He said, "I was the one talking most of the time yesterday. Alan Fissman brought back a document when he left." Mel Gibson got up and returned to the bedroom. He quickly came out and handed the document about Braveheart to his agent. "This is it." Ed L'Amato had already read the document about Braveheart. Some time ago, he and Mel Gibson had lobbied several major film companies. Therefore, he just picked it up and flipped through it casually. He looked up again and said, "Mel, this is a good opportunity for you. But first, you have to talk to Eric Williams in person. My personal thoughts are in these documents." "I don't think there's anything to talk about," Mel Gibson said, pointing to the newspaper on the coffee table. "And although it's disgusting to be secretly photographed, I think that since Eric Williams is optimistic about this project, the film companies won't refuse to invest in it. I can use this to gain more power. Although I admire Eric Williams' ability, I don't really want to cooperate with Firefly. If that's the case, I won't be able to gain too much control." "Mel, this is a movie with a budget of at least $50 million US, Ed L'Amato said solemnly. If you screw it up, you'll have a hard time in Hollywood in the next few years. Think about Cutthroat Island 2 years ago, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Before he made Last Action Hero, his salary was $15 million US. But because of the box office failure of Last Action Hero, he only got $3 million US from Firefly Pictures' new film. He's not even as good as some second-tier actors. Mel Gibson was silent for a moment, then said, "So what you just said is..." Ed Limato noticed the change in Mel Gibson's expression and said, "Eric Williams has never failed a movie he has personally participated in. So you should talk to Eric Williams in person and find out his specific thoughts about this movie. Then we'll talk about the conditions. This way, even if we can't reach an agreement with Firefly, we can cooperate with other film companies to ensure that nothing goes wrong." Ed, if Eric Williams finds out that he's been fooled, what do you think he'll do? Ed Limato looked as though he was used to seeing the world. He said, "Mir, what I just said is only a possibility. If Eric Williams is really optimistic about this project, I think he will definitely agree to our conditions. Even if the two sides don't reach an agreement, and you use some of his ideas in the future production, I don't think it's a big deal. You're now an A-list superstar. As long as the two sides have the same interests in the future, we'll definitely continue to cooperate." Mel Gibson thought for a moment and nodded. "Then you contact the meeting time. We'll go back to Los Angeles together." At about the same time, in Malibu, Los Angeles, Eric was reading today's newspaper gloomily. Drew sat opposite Eric and laughed from time to time. "Eric, there's a good show to watch. You promised someone last night." Eric thought of Sophie and regretted being too eager. In his memory, although Braveheart had won a lot at the Oscars, the box office was not very good. Therefore, Eric would never fight for this project at all costs. If the competition between the major film companies led to Mel Gibson raising the price, Eric would directly give up the project. After secretly reflecting on this small mistake, Eric quickly began to think of countermeasures. After a while, Eric looked up. "Drew, can you get me a pen?" The little girl, who was sipping milk from a glass like a cat, didn't move from her chair. She shouted outside the restaurant, "Natasha, get me a pen." A moment later, one of the Russian twins appeared in the restaurant with a sharpened pencil and handed it to Eric. Eric took it and thanked her. He didn't know if the Russian girl was older or younger, but she took away the empty cutlery next to her. He said to the little girl, "You're getting lazier." Drew didn't feel ashamed. "I'm lazy. It's too late for you to realize it now." Eric smiled and shook his head. He lowered his head and wrote something in the blank space of the newspaper. He then continued, "By the way, how's TG doing?" Drew pouted unhappily. "You only remembered after being back for so many days. I thought you had forgotten about our small company." Eric ignored Drew's small complaint. Drew had to continue. "Detective Airplane 2 Foot is finished. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is also halfway done. There are still a few movies that will be handed over to Fox's production department. Liz will go to 20th Century Fox as the vice president. This matter has been decided." Eric remembered Murdoch's offer to TG a few months ago and asked, "What was the final offer?" Drew blinked. "Didn't you know?" "Huh." Eric felt something was wrong and looked up. Drew also noticed something. "Liz said that you and her old man had an agreement. Fox would buy TG for $120 million US and redeem the distribution rights for Firefly for $80 million US. At the same time, the overseas distribution rights for TG's movies will be given to Firefly. That's what they said at the time. Although the price was reasonable, I didn't agree." Drew froze and suddenly put down the glass of milk in his hand. "Liz lied to me. I'm going to get even with her. This isn't over," the little girl said and ran out before Eric had time to stop her. There was a burst of Natasha in the hall and it quickly quieted down. Eric looked at the suddenly empty dining room and shook his head with a smile. Although he didn't agree, he didn't object either. Eric didn't think that why Lisabeth would lie to Drew. It was probably that old fox, Murdoch, who played some word games, tricking his own daughter into it. This was going to be interesting. He had seen people who tricked their fathers, but not their daughters. "Eric, I'm really sorry. I didn't expect things to turn out like this." As soon as Eric arrived at the company, Alan appeared in front of him with today's Seattle Times in his hand. It doesn't matter. It's just an accident. It's mainly because I didn't think it through. The two walked into the office together and Alan said, Mel Gibson's agent just called me. Mel Gibson wants to talk to you in person. Talk to me in person? Eric repeated this sentence, then showed a knowing smile and asked, How did you reply to them? I didn't give them an accurate answer, Alan said. But when we talked on the phone, Mel Gibson was already at the Seattle airport. He'll be in Los Angeles in 4 hours. Eric, do you want to see him? Do you think they've seen today's newspaper? Eric didn't answer. Instead, he asked another question. Alan nodded. That's for sure. And I think that maybe the other major film companies have already contacted Mel Gibson to ask about this matter. Then why do you think they want to see me in such a hurry? Alan thought for a moment and shook his head. I don't quite understand this, but it shouldn't be a bad thing. Eric smiled and picked up a note from the side. He quickly wrote a string of words and handed it to Alan. There's no need for a meeting. You can let the production department talk to them according to the conditions on this note. In addition, if the management of DreamWorks Animation is confirmed, transfer the negotiation of this project to DreamWorks Animation. What I wrote on the note is the bottom line of our project. Alan looked at the contents of the note, nodded, and walked out of Eric's office. What, they rejected it? Standing in the lobby of the Los Angeles International Airport, Mel Gibson heard the words of his agent, Ed Ramato, after hanging up the phone. His tone was a little surprised and angry at being ignored. Ed Ramato nodded, and his face was a little pale. I think that maybe Firefly thought that we deliberately released the news in today's newspaper. You know, this kind of thing happens all the time. If he had really revealed it in advance, Mel Gibson wouldn't have felt anything. However, he was clearly not the one who did it, and he was wronged. The proud Mel Gibson couldn't stand it and said, Then forget it. Didn't you just say that the CEO of Universal Pictures, Michael Eisner, also called? Maybe we can make an appointment with him to talk. I think it's best not to do that, Ed Ramato said. Just now, although Eric Williams refused to see you, they have already given specific conditions for cooperation. Mel Gibson's expression relaxed a little. He asked, What conditions? Ed Ramato replied. Firefly wants you to direct and play the male lead at the same time. The salary is $15 million, and you can also enjoy a part of the director and producer's dividends. They also promised that the investment for this movie will not be less than $60 million. Chapter 560. In the following days, Braveheart received more and more attention in Hollywood. When they learned that Mel Gibson did not immediately accept the conditions proposed by Firefly Pictures, several other major film companies studied the script of Braveheart, and then began to contact Mel Gibson. Because Braveheart and the sensational Ben-Hur 30 years ago were both epics, there were many similarities in the plot. What was more coincidental was that the screenwriter of Ben-Hur was Lew Wallace, and the screenwriter of Braveheart was Randall Wallace. The two had the same surname. After some rumors, some people even began to compare Braveheart to Hollywood's second Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur, which was released in 1960, earned more than $70 million at the box office with a ticket price of 50 cents at the time. Based on the average ticket price of around $4 in 1993, it was equivalent to $560 million at the time. At the moment when the forms of entertainment were becoming more and more diverse, $560 million at the box office in North America was not something that the major Hollywood film companies dared to think about for the time being. But even if it was only half of $560 million, it was enough to make all the Hollywood film companies go crazy. Eric did not expect things to develop to this point. Perhaps stimulated by the joint pursuit of the media and Hollywood, Mel Gibson's confidence swelled. He proposed a series of harsh conditions such as higher pay and share, more investment, and absolute control of the film to the negotiators sent by the Firefly production department. The main purpose of investing more than $50 million in a big production was to make money, and the Oscars were just icing on the cake. In the original spacetime, Braveheart did not have any outstanding box office. Eric would only agree to Mel Gibson's conditions if his brain was fried. In the absence of any results, Eric simply gave up on following up on the project. As for Sophie, on the day that the news was exposed, Eric called her again and frankly told Sophie that things had changed. Sophie also expressed her annoyance and ridiculed Eric, but her tone always had a hint of coquettishness. Although Braveheart was highly sought after by other film companies, it was just a casual interlude for Eric. He had too many things to pay attention to. In early August, Catherine Bigelow's Saving Private Ryan, which she had been preparing for a long time, officially began filming in Ireland. Although Eric could not go to Europe in person, he still kept an eye on the film. He would call Catherine every few days to discuss the filming. At the same time, True Lies had also started filming in Washington. The quality of Cameron's movie was absolutely guaranteed. Eric would only casually knock him down when he burned too much money. Of course, it was basically useless. In addition, the 2D animated film The Lion King, which had been personally supervised by Katzenberg, was more than half completed. Although it could be released at the end of the year, Eric insisted on releasing the film next year. These were all planned to be the main films of the 1994 summer season. At the end of the year, Detective Jet 2, Night Visit the Vampire, and Quentin's Pulp Fiction were all in production in an orderly manner. In addition, the second film of Jurassic Park was naturally included in Firefly's production plan. After Roland Emmerich completed Crash, he also began preparing for Day of Independence. Eric also had to pay attention to the remaining films with Sony Pictures from time to time. Finally, there was the newly established DreamWorks Film Company. The 3 female leads and the director for Thunderbolt Beauty had been confirmed, and the auditions for the secondary actors had begun. Although 90% of the work did not require Eric to do personally, the total investment of these projects was more than $1 billion. The things that required Eric's personal attention piled up, and still kept him busy every day. After a few days of consideration, Murdoch had no choice but to agree to most of the conditions of the withdrawal plan proposed by Firefly Pictures. The two sides began to negotiate on the final details. It was expected that all the shares would be completed by mid-September. In order not to attract as much attention as possible, this matter was very low-key. Neither Murdoch nor Eric personally participated in the negotiations. Sitting in the office of Firefly Pictures headquarters, Eric was on the phone with Chris, who was far away in Northern Europe. After a month of negotiations, the acquisition of Nokia had entered the final stage. Chris successfully obtained 51% of the shares of Nokia's mobile telecommunications division for $420 million, achieving absolute control. Although the premium was more than 20%, in Eric's view, this deal was absolutely a piece of cake. Eric was holding the microphone and talking to Chris about setting up a company in Ireland to avoid taxes. Suddenly, the office door was pushed open. Eric looked up and saw Elizabeth barging in with red eyes. At the same time, Drew was with a sullen face. Tina Fey shrunk her neck and followed behind the two women. Noticing that Eric was looking at her, Tina Fey winked at Eric, as if hinting at something. In fact, even without hinting, Eric could almost guess what had happened when he saw Elizabeth and Drew walk to his desk, one on the left and one on the right. After a few words with Chris, he hurriedly hung up the phone. Before Eric could say anything, Elizabeth pointed at Drew and said, "Eric, tell her, did you talk to my father about TG?" Just as Eric nodded, Drew said indignantly, "I know we talked about it, but Eric didn't agree to your father's conditions at that time. You lied to me." Elizabeth sniffled and suddenly looked at Eric. "You obviously agreed." After that morning, the little girl disappeared for a few days. Eric thought that the matter had been resolved, but he didn't expect that the two of them were even worse. Speaking of that phone call, Eric didn't agree or disagree, so no matter how you interpreted it, there was nothing wrong. Right now, looking at the two pairs of eyes staring at him, Eric couldn't side with either side. He could only get up and pull the two girls to sit on the sofa in the guest area. He said, "What's the situation now? Tell me first." Drew immediately looked up and confidently complained, "She refuses to admit that she lied to me." "Why do you say that I lied to you?" Eric obviously agreed. Elizabeth also became agitated. "You damn liar," Drew ridiculed again. Perhaps because she felt wronged, Elizabeth couldn't hold it in anymore. She jumped up and pounced on Drew. Seeing that, Eric quickly went up and separated the two girls. Seeing that the two girls didn't forget to scratch each other even though they were separated by him, Eric didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "You can fight, but don't scratch my face, it's all mine." As soon as he said that, Elizabeth opened her little white teeth and bit on Eric's arm. The little girl was unhappy immediately. She couldn't even bear to bite. Why did he have to bite first? Therefore, she grabbed Eric's arm and bit on it too. After a while, Eric sat on the sofa again with his sleeves rolled up. He looked at the red crescents on his left and right arms and sighed. He ignored Tina Fey, who was still covering her mouth and giggling at the side, and looked at the two girls who were sitting opposite him, who had become much more obedient. "All right, this is my mistake. I didn't make it clear at that time, so stop fooling around. Just follow the plan that Rupert and I discussed. Do you have any objections?" Drew only pouted and turned her little head away without saying anything. Elizabeth shook her head and looked at the red teeth marks on Eric's arm with guilt. Suddenly, she lowered her head again. She was already feeling guilty. In fact, she also realized that it was her old man who had set her up. However, facing the little girl's questioning, it was even more impossible for Elizabeth, who had always been strong, to admit that she was lying. However, as a daughter, she couldn't point the finger at her father. Therefore, it was a stalemate. After dragging on for a few days, she finally had to confront Eric. "Since there's no objection, that's it then. Drew, Tina, you two can go back first. I have something to discuss with Liz." The little girl snorted softly and stood up to walk out angrily. Although Tina Fey was a little reluctant, she quickly followed her. As soon as the office door was closed, Elizabeth whispered like a mosquito, "Eric, I'm sorry. I didn't know my father would be like this." "Forget it, I'll settle this with your father slowly." Looking at Elizabeth suddenly raising her head, Eric added with a smile, "Don't worry, it's definitely not about physical strength." Elizabeth quickly recalled the question Eric asked her before and smiled. However, she no longer pleaded for her unscrupulous father. After all, they were at the top of the pyramid of capital. Even if they were anxious, it was unlikely that they would go to the extent of making the other party bankrupt. After stammering for a while, Elizabeth looked at Eric's arm and asked weakly, "Are you still in pain?" Eric reached out his hand and rubbed one of the teeth marks. He smiled and said, "I'm fine now. I'll go get a rabies vaccine later." Elizabeth chuckled and wanted to find something to throw at Eric. However, there were no pillows on the sofa in the office. She could only roll her eyes at Eric. "You quit Fox. You're planning to buy the network, right?" Yes, this plan was set a long time ago. Launching Fox was just to avoid legal trouble. Firefly maintained shares in Fox, so the relationship between the two parties would always be closer. Although Elizabeth was a little reluctant to see Firefly leave, she also knew the reason behind it. She said with disappointment, "Now that TG is also gone, doesn't that mean that we have nothing to do with each other in the future?" Eric smiled and said, "Why are you dumping me?" Elizabeth's gaze was a little bitter. "You have so many women. I heard that you've been going to the Spanish sisters' place a lot recently. Do you still care about me?" Eric said without hesitation, "Of course I care about each of my women." Elizabeth's heartbeat seemed to speed up a little, but she refused to be outdone and said, "That's really shameless of you." "I won't deny it. Anyway, you all know." Eric shrugged and said, "What about you? Drew said that you will be the vice president of 20th Century Fox. What will you be doing specifically?" "The film company's performance hasn't been very good in the past few years. Dad asked me to be in charge of production and continue to be the CEO of TG." Speaking of TG, Eric thought of the big trouble that had been pestering TG. He asked, "Is it done with Jim Carrey?" "Yes, it's done. He has signed another 3 film contracts. $15 million in salary and a 5% share of the profits." In the past few years, more and more top stars in Hollywood had begun to ask for a share of the profits from their films. Eric was not surprised by this price. If it were other A-list stars, Although the film company would be willing to give a similar high price, they would definitely not sign 3 films at once. However, Jim Carrey's box office appeal was very stable. Although he had reached his peak since The Disguised Genius, he was still in the heyday of his career in the past 2 years. In addition, the cost of Jim Carrey's films had always been relatively low. Fox would not take too much risk by signing such a price. Eric thought about these things and asked, "I haven't heard about Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a long time. How do you plan to arrange this TV series?" "It will probably premiere on September 28th. Elizabeth thought for a while and nodded. "It is indeed September 28th because this is a vampire movie with a relatively niche theme. Although some people think that it can be categorized as a youth campus fantasy drama and proposed to use Friends as the prequel, in the end, they decided to use The X-Files as the prequel. This is safer." "Eric, how many ratings do you think this TV series will get?" The original version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was broadcast on the very small WB-TV station under Time Warner. At this time, it was broadcast on Fox TV, which had already covered the entire United States. With the audience base cultivated by The X-Files, it should not be a problem for the TV series to be on par with The X-Files. However, Eric did not dare to make any guarantees. He said, "Joss Whedon's script is very good. If you don't make any changes during the filming process like the movie version, the ratings should be guaranteed. As for how high the ratings will be, I dare not say." Elizabeth heard the uncertainty in Eric's tone, but she did not take it to heart. After all, a TV series with high ratings did not appear that often. The 4 major TV stations broadcast 3 hours of primetime every day. Excluding some variety shows and special holiday programs, there were no less than 10 TV series per week on average. However, there were often only 1 or 2 TV series that supported the ratings. Putting aside this matter, Elizabeth asked, "You just said that you have something to talk to me about. What is it?" "Nothing, just a casual chat. I haven't been to your place in a long time. How are you tonight?" "Julia is not at home." Elizabeth had just blurted out this sentence when she immediately realized that it was inappropriate. Her face became bright red, and she did not dare to look into Eric's eyes. Chapter 561. The phone rang for a long time before Eric opened his eyes. Elizabeth, who was in his arms, also woke up at the same time. "Is this your mobile phone?" Elizabeth said vaguely and leaned against Eric. She had no intention of getting up. Eric reached for the mobile phone on the woman's dressing table. As soon as the call connected, Murdoch's exasperated voice came through. "Eric, what the hell is going on? You promised me." Elizabeth heard her father's voice. Her face turned red, but she came over curiously. Eric wondered, "Rupert, shouldn't you tell me what happened first?" On the other end of the phone, Murdoch heard Eric's doubtful tone, and could only patiently explain what had happened. While talking to Murdoch, Eric reached for the remote control, and turned on the TV in the bedroom. The famous morning news program Good Morning America, on ABC TV was broadcasting an interview with a guest. "Mr. Kroll, what do you think will happen if Firefly Pictures withdraws its shares from Fox?" After the camera cut, a middle-aged man with glasses said slowly, "First of all, we have to understand why Firefly Pictures withdrew its shares from Fox. From the recent series of cooperation with foreign companies, we can see that Firefly Pictures has a strong influence on Sony Columbia, 20th Century Fox, and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, while maintaining its own strength. This also means that Firefly's development in the film business has reached a limit. With the profitability of Firefly Pictures, Eric Williams will certainly not be willing to accept this, so entering the television industry is the inevitable path for Firefly Pictures. But in recent years, the Fox television network has developed very rapidly. News Corporation will definitely not choose to sell the Fox television network to Firefly. Therefore, the 10% shares held by Firefly Pictures have become an obstacle to their acquisition of other television networks. In order to avoid being investigated by the SEC and FCC, when they enter the television industry in the future, Firefly Pictures has to sell their shares in the Fox television network. The host kept nodding. When the guest finished speaking, he asked the question again. Will this withdrawal affect Fox and News Corporation? Of course, and the impact will be very big. We can see that Fox opened up with Friends 5 years ago. Then with the TV series The X-Files and the reality show, Who Will Be a Millionaire, they once again expanded the audience of Fox and increased the influence of Fox. And these 3 shows are all closely related to Firefly Pictures. It is worth mentioning that since the broadcast of Friends 5 years ago, Fox has not developed any popular TV shows with complete copyright. Once Firefly Pictures pulls out, Fox Television Network is likely to lose these 3 viewership mainstays. If that really happens, its influence is equivalent to a tent being stripped of its 3 highest pillars. Fox Television Network's overall strength will drop by a lot in an instant. This kind of blow is simply devastating. The host's tone seemed to be gloating as he asked again, Mr. Kroll, how do you think Firefly Pictures will develop their television business? Will they establish the 5th largest television network? This possibility is very low. Eric Williams is most likely to choose between ABC, CBS, and NBC for acquisition. The host asked excitedly, that is to say, ABC is likely to be the acquisition target. Of course, and I personally think that Firefly will most likely choose ABC because ABC is the one with the best indicators among the 3 major television networks. The struggle between NBC's management and its parent company, General Motors Group, will greatly affect Firefly's evaluation of it. CBS has been badly damaged in recent years, so it will definitely not be Firefly's first choice. Eric had already put on his clothes at this time. He listened to the guests from ABC on the TV, who did not hesitate to attack the other competitors. He said to Murdoch, who was still online, Rupert, you should know that taking the initiative to make a big deal out of this matter will not bring me any benefits. And after the other 3 television stations understand my personal intentions, Firefly's acquisition plan will be greatly hindered. I can't do that. Murdoch said something else and Eric nodded. Don't worry, I will let Michael attend the press conference in person. Myself no today Eric was about to find an excuse to refuse when he saw Elizabeth standing next to him shaking his arm with a pitiful expression. Eric's heart softened and he had to say, well, I will be there on time. 10 o'clock Century City, I remember. Well, I will have someone investigate who leaked this matter. After hanging up the phone, Eric stood in the bedroom and patted the Motorola mobile phone in his hand. A moment later he suddenly laughed. Elizabeth was standing quietly beside Eric, afraid to disturb his thoughts. When she saw Eric laughing, she was a little annoyed and patted Eric on the shoulder. Are you happy? Eric's smile did not fade. He reached out to grab Elizabeth's small hand and squeezed it. I know who leaked this matter. Regarding the withdrawal negotiations between Firefly Pictures and Fox Television Network, only the senior executives of both sides knew about it. Even if some people abandoned their professional ethics, the losses caused by leaking the company's secrets were definitely much more serious than the profits generated by the disclosure to the media. Once the matter was exposed, in Western society, where personal credibility was highly valued, this person's career would be completely over. Other than the company's senior executives who were involved in this matter, the only person who knew about Eric's withdrawal plan was the lawless little girl Drew. During this period of time, the girl had been living in the Sharp Corner Manor. Eric often brought some documents home to deal with. When the 2 of them occasionally chatted, Eric did not hide anything, so it was not strange that the girl knew about this matter. Eric's handling of the TG matter yesterday was obviously biased towards Elizabeth. With Drew's intelligence, she would definitely be able to discover this. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand why the girl would do something like this to cause trouble for News Corporation. However, this trouble was obviously a little too big. From the news that was still being broadcasted on the TV in the bedroom, the stock price of Fox Television Network's parent company, News Corporation, had plummeted by 5.6% within 2 hours of the NYSE opening. Its market value had shrunk by more than $1.5 billion in a short period of time. If Eric could think of this, Elizabeth could also guess some of it. Listening to the data that had just been broadcasted on the TV, she said angrily, Drew is really too much. Eric turned off the TV, pulled Elizabeth downstairs and said, "I will teach Drew a lesson, but in the end, this matter was caused by your old man." Elizabeth saw that Eric did not look angry at all. He even had a smile on his face. She said indignantly, "Even at this time, you are still biased towards her." "I was biased towards you yesterday, and I am biased towards her today. You two are even." Eric walked into the dining room with Elizabeth. Julia was out filming, and the little girl, Emma, had also gone to Las Vegas. The villa seemed a little cold and cheerless. Eric ordered the servants to serve breakfast, and then he said to Elizabeth, who still looked worried, "Don't worry, the matter is not as serious as they said. I haven't taken away the 3 pillars yet, and you know, I will only take away friends in the end, and that will be next year. As long as there is a press conference later, the stock price of News Corporation will definitely rise again." A maid handed the day's newspaper to Eric. Eric casually flipped through a few pages. Most of the headlines were about Firefly Pictures withdrawing from Fox Television Network. Eric picked up his mobile phone and dialed the number of Sharp Corner Manor, but no one answered. He then dialed Drew's personal mobile phone number, but it was turned off. Eric threw the mobile phone on the dining table and smiled bitterly at Elizabeth, who was looking at him, and said, "The girl ran away." Chapter 562. When Eric and Elizabeth arrived at Fox's headquarters in Century City, the well-informed media reporters had already surrounded the gate. It was estimated that only a few people would be invited to the press conference. Eric guessed that the situation at Firefly's headquarters in Burbank was similar. With the help of the security personnel, Eric's car drove proudly through the crowd into the park. As soon as he got out of the car, Eric saw Murdoch and Michael Lynn coming up to him with a few people. Elizabeth got out from the other side of the car and saw that several people, including her father, were looking at her affectionately. She blushed and said goodbye to everyone, then left in a hurry in the name of work. Eric greeted Murdoch and the others as usual, and then asked as if nothing had happened, "Michael Rupert, have you found out who leaked this matter?" Murdoch and Michael Lynn looked at each other, and finally Michael Lynn said, "Eric, maybe Miss Barrymore accidentally leaked it." Eric secretly cursed the wretched girl. She didn't know how to hide her foxtail well. However, in just one day, the news of Firefly's withdrawal of shares had spread to all the mainstream newspapers and TV stations. It was impossible to hide. Murdoch and Michael Lynn must also know that this matter was definitely not, accidentally, leaked by the little girl. The implication of premeditation was too obvious. Michael said that just to leave some leeway for everyone. "Yesterday the little girl complained to me that she was cheated. I didn't expect such a thing to happen today. I'll definitely teach her a lesson later." Eric walked into the office building with everyone and said casually, "Since it has already happened, let's discuss how to deal with it now." Michael Lynn didn't know what Eric's first sentence meant, and thought that he was just saying it casually. However, a strange look flashed in Murdoch's eyes. Eric happened to catch a glimpse of the change in Murdoch's expression. Since the other party had noticed his hint just now, he reckoned that he would soon understand the ins and outs of the matter. As for how the old fox would feel afterward, that was not something Eric cared about. There were still more than 20 minutes before the press conference. The group of people did not go directly to the press conference hall. Instead, they went to a conference room to discuss some issues for the press conference. Although the withdrawal plan had the greatest impact on Fox, and was likely to cause the stock price of News Corp to remain low for a long time in the future, it also had an impact on the next stage of the layout of Firefly Pictures. The most direct manifestation was that while the stock price of News Corp fell, the stock price of most companies involved in the television business on the New York Stock Exchange rose to varying degrees. Since the news of the withdrawal of shares had been leaked in advance, it was useless to deny it. Whether others believed it or not, Firefly needed a reasonable excuse to temporarily brush off the media, so as to minimize the uncertainty that might be caused by the acquisition of the television network in the early stages of preparation. After discussing the joint statement of the two sides for the press conference, Murdoch took the initiative to leave the conference room with Fox's people, giving Eric and Michael Lynn a chance to talk alone. After the outsiders left, Michael Lynn asked, "Eric, how do we deal with this? Are the major television networks already on alert? Eric had already made plans on the way to Century City. He made a phone call to understand the situation and said, "I just asked. The negotiations for Viacom's acquisition of Blockbuster have reached the final stage. If we want, we can intervene at this time." "You mean we're using it as a cover to expand into the video rental business?" Eric said, "This move is definitely very useful, and it makes sense to sell Fox's shares in order to expand into the video rental business." 1993 was the last period of prosperity for the video rental industry, and it was also the most profitable period. Except for Eric, who could see the future, no one would believe that in the next few years, the video rental industry would decline because of the rise of DVDs and the emergence of online rental business. At this time, the scale of the videotape industry had even surpassed the total box office of the movie industry. Because the FCC's strict anti-monopoly restrictions on the television industry had gradually been relaxed in recent years, most people still didn't realize that the American television industry had entered another period of large-scale mergers and consolidation. Firefly's excuse of expanding into the videotape rental business was very reasonable, even if it didn't convince everyone. At the subsequent press conference, when Murdoch announced to dozens of reporters that Firefly and Fox would continue to cooperate, Eric also publicized Firefly's plan to expand into the video rental market. He also pointed out that Firefly's acquisition target was Blockbuster, which was about to be acquired by Viacom. As for the future, Firefly would definitely lose in the competition with Viacom, so Eric was not lying. In order to complete the act, Firefly sent a vice president to start contacting Blockbuster's executives. Viacom had already offered a sky-high price of $8 billion for Blockbuster, which had more than 3,000 video rental stores in the U.S. Firefly's sudden intervention immediately caused the negotiations between Viacom and Blockbuster to come to a standstill. Although Blockbuster's management realized that Firefly had no intention of acquiring Blockbuster, in order to get a higher price from Viacom, Blockbuster did not mind feigning civility with Firefly. The originally smooth situation came to an abrupt end. The exasperated Sam Leisherdong published an open letter in the Los Angeles Times, scolding Eric for not following the rules. However, the acquisition of Blockbuster was an important part of Viacom's acquisition of Paramount. If the acquisition of Blockbuster failed, Viacom would lose the bargaining chip for large-scale debt financing, and the acquisition of Paramount would go down the drain. Leisherdong had no choice but to raise the price again. Eric turned a deaf ear to Leisherdong's provocation, and continued to work and live his life step by step. After the press conference, although the rapid decline of News Corporation's stock price stopped, because the market was worried about the separation between Fox and Firefly, the stock price did not return to its previous price. Perhaps Murdoch quickly understood the reason for the matter. A few days later, 20th Century Fox successfully completed the acquisition of TG. The price was raised from the original $120 million to $140 million. Eric could guess Murdoch's thoughts. After such a big mess, although the old Fox felt that he was in the wrong, he was absolutely unwilling to raise the price. However, in order to prevent a certain little fox from causing any more trouble, he reluctantly offered $20 million as compensation. After acquiring TG, in order to boost the confidence of investors, Fox began to increase the promotion of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They also publicized the fact that Eric was personally the producer. It was the middle of August, and a sudden incident instantly disrupted the lives of many ordinary people. On August 18th, a dentist in Los Angeles officially filed a lawsuit in federal court, accusing Michael Jackson of molesting his son, who was not even 13 years old. The Jackson case that shocked the world broke out. In the face of the lawsuit, Michael Jackson, who was in the middle of his Dangerous World Tour, had to stop the concert and return to the United States to respond to the lawsuit. Eric knew that the Dangerous World Tour represented the peak of Michael Jackson's career, but it also became the final peak of Michael Jackson's career. After Michael Jackson returned to the United States, hundreds of reporters quickly surrounded Jackson's house. A worldwide carnival of public opinion broke out. As for how the subject of the carnival felt, who cared? There were too many discussions about this matter in the future. Although Eric knew that Michael Jackson was innocent, at this time, Eric could only maintain a cold attitude. He had no interaction with Michael Jackson, and Eric also knew that he could do nothing at this time. Not to mention the dentist and the media that attacked Michael Jackson. Even his own sister stood up to slander her brother as a pedophile. How could Jackson prove his innocence? Perhaps because of this incident, or because he was too busy. Eric's mood was inexplicably irritable and depressed recently. Many people around him noticed this. Jeffrey also brought a psychiatrist to Eric's office, but he was directly rejected by Eric. In the next few days, the number of people around Eric suddenly increased. Famke Janssen, who was originally filming the new season of The X-Files in Canada, specially rushed back to Los Angeles to stay with Eric for a few days. Jennifer Connelly followed, and Nicole, who was filming The Mummy in Morocco, also began to call back frequently. The sharp-minded Penelope became more docile in front of Eric, and everyone around them seemed to be careful. The little girl, who had caused trouble by leaking the stock withdrawal plan, directly stayed at the Sharp Corner Manor. She even called Tina Fey and Claudia Schiffer over, and secretly asked Eric if he wanted to try the twins. Joanna and Virginia also hoped more than once that Eric could stay in New York for a while to accompany the two little ones. Eric also knew why Jeffrey and the others, as well as the women around him, looked as if they were facing a great enemy. The proportion of Hollywood stars with mental illness was too high, and many people often chose to relieve their stress in extreme situations, and those extreme methods usually cause great harm to their bodies and minds. Eric was the true backbone of Firefly. If anything happened to him, Firefly would soon become a big ship out of control. In the current situation, no one wanted to see this happen. "I plan to stay in New York for a while," Eric said at the regular meeting of the executives in the new week. When the executives of Firefly heard this, they were not surprised at all. Instead, they breathed a sigh of relief and then nodded in agreement. Seeing that no one objected, Eric began to discuss the arrangements after his departure. The summer vacation was over, and the withdrawal of shares from Fox Television Network had been settled. The most important thing for Firefly Pictures now was the early layout of the acquisition of ABC Television Network, mainly including the formation of the acquisition team, the coordination of financing channels, the acquisition of shares of ABC Television Network, and other matters. Since Michael Lynn had confirmed that he would be leaving next year, Eric had no scruples and handed over the matter to Katzenberg. In terms of movies, most of the projects were proceeding in an orderly manner. Even if something happened during Eric's departure, he could just come back and make corrections. The script, lead actors, director, and the main creative team of the recent movie Thunderbolt Girls had been confirmed, and the rest of the trivial matters did not require Eric to intervene too much. Chapter 563. My life is monotonous. I catch chickens and people catch me. All chickens are the same, and so are all people. Therefore, I feel a bit bored. However, if you can tame me, then my life will definitely be happy. Joanna Pakula was sitting on the beach mat, holding a thin book called The Little Prince in her hand. She was reading slowly and softly. Her calm voice had a reassuring charm. Her voice was scattered by the afternoon breeze and blended with the sound of the waves not far away. This was the private beach of a manor in East Hampton, Long Island. A beach mat was spread on the pure white sand, and a parasol was standing behind it, blocking most of the hot afternoon sun. Some snacks and drinks were placed on a small round table next to the beach mat. Eric, wearing only a pair of beach pants, was lying not far from Joanna with his arms resting on his head. His eyes were closed, and it was hard to tell if he had fallen asleep. There was a distance of more than half a meter between them, and the two cute little guys were lying on the thick blanket. Kevin, who was close to Eric, was sleeping soundly with his eyes closed and his mouth slightly open. Hawaii, who was next to Joanna, was looking at the book in her mother's hand with her clear eyes open. She only blinked when Joanna turned the page occasionally, as if she was urging something. After leaving Los Angeles for a week, Eric turned off his mobile phone and stopped reading the annoying newspapers. He also stopped thinking about the company's affairs. He only took an hour to deal with emails every day, and spent most of his remaining energy on the two little guys. It seemed that he was developing in the direction of a full-time stay-at-home dad. Joanna finished another page of the book and reached out to touch her daughter's soft blonde hair. She looked at Eric not far away with satisfaction, and then continued to read softly. Since she left the Polish National Academy of Drama in her early 20s, she had pursued fame and fortune, encountered difficulties, had small glories, and experienced big downfalls. She was like a boat lost in the ocean, drifting. At the age of 35, she finally leaned against a peaceful harbor surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. Although she was only 70% satisfied, she was no longer demanding. Even if her sudden disappearance after the movie Tornado caused the media to speculate, wonder, and ridicule, Joanna was always calm and at ease, because she knew that there was a young man who would protect her and her mother well. He had indeed protected them well. After reading for a while, Joanna heard a sound coming from behind her. She turned around and saw a tall figure in a t-shirt and hot pants walking towards her on the stone steps that connected the beach and the manor. Seeing that Joanna was looking at her, the girl waved her hand and walked down the stairs. She took off her high heels and put them aside. Stepping on the fine sand, she walked quickly to Joanna and crouched down beside her. She put her arms around her neck and kissed her cheek intimately. Then she bent down and kissed Kevin's little face gently. She reached out and pinched Kevin's chubby face before she stood up. Joanna looked at her sister who was walking towards Eric after doing these things. Her eyes flashed with helplessness. Eva, you said that you were going to participate in the fashion show. Shouldn't you be training now? A few months ago, Eva Pakula had successfully completed her immigration with the help of her sister. Although she was 14 years younger than Joanna, Eva Pakula, who was born from the same mother, was also a beauty. With Emily's help, Eva Pakula quickly signed a contract with a modeling agency. Recently, she had also received an invitation from Emily's fashion company to participate in the New York Fashion Week in September. I'm here for work, Eva Pakula said. She picked up the glass on the small round table and poured herself a glass of juice. She lay down on the beach mat beside Eric and grabbed a strand of blonde hair by her ear and gently stroked Eric's face. Joanna was a little dissatisfied and was about to stop her sister's actions when she saw Eric shaking his head and waking up. Seeing Eric open his eyes, Eva Pakula immediately let go of the hair in her hand and greeted him as if nothing had happened. Hi, Eric. Eric touched his cheek subconsciously. When he saw the girl next to him greeting him, he understood. When he sat up and was about to greet Eva Pakula, he heard a baby crying beside him. Hawaii, who was about to close his eyes and take a nap because his mother had stopped reading, also started crying when he heard his brother's cry. Eric didn't have time to pay attention to Eva. He and Joanna hurriedly carried the 2 babies. Eric checked them briefly and said, They peed, Joan. Let's go back. Eva Pakula came over guiltily and said, Eric, do you need my help? Eric pointed at the blanket on the beach mat and said, Take this back. Don't worry about the rest. Let the servants come over and clean it up. Eva Pakula nodded and squatted down to fold the blanket. When she got up, Eric and Joanna had already walked to the stone steps not far away. She hurriedly followed them. Walking to the stone steps, she put on her high heels and walked all the way to the manor through the dense shrubs. Looking at the surrounding environment covered by green trees and the luxurious villa not far away, Eva Pakula couldn't help but feel envious. In just a few months in the United States, Eva Pakula deeply realized how rich her sister's little man was. In order to protect the 2 women and the children as much as possible, Eric bought 6 manors of different sizes in Southampton and East Hampton. Eva Pakula had just arrived in the United States for a few months. When she first lived with Joanna, she had moved several times with her sister whom she hadn't seen for many years. However, before Eva Pakula had time to adapt to this luxurious life, she was sent to Manhattan by Joanna for model training. Although Joanna had arranged a place for her in Manhattan that was 100 times better than those girls who had been training with her, but could only live in the basement, Eva wanted to live in such a spacious and luxurious manner with servants all the time. Eva's mentality was easily seen through. After Eric came to Chongdao, Eva had come back from Manhattan 3 times in just a week. This was also the reason why Xiao Anna felt helpless just now. When Xiao Anna and Eric were together, she felt that they were the same age because of Eric's mature temperament. However, although Eva was only 1 year younger than Eric, Xiao Anna treated her more like a daughter. She loved and spoiled her, but she also felt helpless when facing her sister's thoughts. Although Xiao Anna could accept serving Eric with Virginia, she couldn't imagine what would happen if her sister and Eric got together. Virginia wasn't as calm as Xiao Anna. After recovering for a few months after giving birth, she quickly got another movie contract. Now she was out shooting. When Eric didn't come, the two little guys were taken care of by Xiao Anna and a few nannies. After coming to the villa, Xiao Anna put her daughter to sleep and asked a nanny to look after her carefully. Then she came to Eric, who was changing Kevin's diaper. Xiao Anna looked at her sister who was walking around in the living room worriedly. She patted Eric's arm lightly. "What's wrong?" Eric was still carefully wiping his son's body and asked casually without looking up. "Eric, you don't mess with Eva, okay?" Eric smiled and changed his son's diaper. He stretched out his hand and scratched the little guy's belly lightly. He said, "You saw it. It was your sister messing with me." Xiao Anna frowned and was about to say something. Eric turned around and hugged the woman in his arms. He patted her back and said, "Don't worry, I promise you." Xiao Anna couldn't believe it. "You're not lying to me?" Eric smiled and let go of Xiao Anna. He picked up his son who was still kicking his legs and said softly, "Why would I lie to you?" Xiao Anna turned her head and looked at her sister who was standing on the west side of the living room and looking at an oil painting on the wall. She suddenly asked, "Is Eva not beautiful enough?" Eva Pakula was of course beautiful. However, Eric always felt that Eva Pakula didn't have the temperament of Xiao Anna who had been through many years. Therefore, he didn't have any other thoughts. However, Eric wouldn't tell her his opinion. He just held back his laughter and shook his head. "Oh, you women are always so strange." Xiao Anna also felt that her question was a little inappropriate. A blush appeared on her cheeks. She hit Eric, who was still smirking. "It's all your fault." Eric saw his son squinting his eyes again. He handed him to the nanny and walked upstairs. "I'm going to take a shower first." When he went downstairs again, the two sisters were sitting side by side on the sofa in the living room, reading a magazine. Eric greeted Eva and made coffee himself. Then he carried the tray to the sofa and sat down. He poured the coffee into several cups. After chatting with her sister for a while, Eva Pakula looked up and asked, "Eric, are you free these days?" Eric handed the steaming coffee to the two sisters and smiled. "Of course I'm free. Do you need any help?" "It's like this. Emily asked me to invite you to her company's fashion show at the New York Fashion Week." Eric remembered that Eva said that she would attend the New York Fashion Week show on September 10th. When he heard this invitation, he immediately lost interest. Not to mention that Eric knew nothing about fashion shows. Even if he went, he would be like a dog looking at stars. More importantly, in Eric's impression, the fashion shows of the major fashion weeks were really boring. Most of the models didn't meet Eric's aesthetic standards. A small number of models who were pleasing to the eye would probably be made into strange shapes by the designers. "I'm not going. I can't appreciate those things." Eric shook his head and said bluntly. Seeing that Eric refused so decisively, Eva Pakula showed a pitiful expression. She even shook Joanna's arm, as if she wanted her sister to support her. Joanna had no choice but to say, "Eric, I used to be a model for a while. In fact, many of the guests in fashion shows don't know much about art. The organizer invited them just to increase the popularity of the show. Anyway, you have nothing to do recently. Why don't you go? You still have shares in Emily's company, right?" Eric held the coffee and listened to Joanna's words. He nodded quickly. "Okay, I'll go." Joanna thought that Eric would continue to refuse. She was about to prepare an excuse in her heart. But when she heard him agree so decisively, she was stunned. Soon she understood something and smiled. Her sister beside her snorted involuntarily and shook Joanna's arm again. "Joan, look at him. He must be doing it on purpose." Eric raised his head and made a surprised expression to Eva, as if to say, "You found out even though I was so subtle." Eva Pakula rolled her eyes. She took out the prepared invitation from her bag and handed it over. Then she said to Joanna, "Joan, you can come with us." Joanna reached out and tidied up her sister's hair. She said, "Who will take care of the 2 babies if I go?" Eva pointed at the nanny who was taking care of the 2 babies in the nursery. "Can't they do it?" Joanna just shook her head. Seeing that Joanna refused, Eva Pakula stopped persuading her. She immediately turned to the man opposite her. "Eric, can I go with you?" Eric was confused. "What?" "I mean, I can go with you and ask someone to take some photos. What do you think?" "Why?" Eva said without hiding anything. "Because you are very famous. If I go with you, a nobody like me will soon become famous." Eric looked at Joanna. The woman smiled but didn't say anything. He had to nod. "Okay. But I don't have a good reputation. Be careful that people don't spread rumors." Eva Pakula even looked forward to it. Hearing Eric's words, she immediately waved her hand and said, "Don't worry. I don't mind." Eric opened the invitation and looked at it. The date was September 12th. After a week of rest in Chongdao, Eric's inexplicable emotions had dissipated. He suddenly remembered that there was a movie that should be produced in New York during this period. After thinking carefully, he remembered that it was Luc Besson's famous movie, Lyon, The Professional. Although Eric had chosen to cooperate with Gaming to produce this movie, he didn't interfere too much. He even forgot about this famous movie for a long time. According to the progress of preparation, this movie might have already started production. Maybe he could go to the set to take a look at it while attending the Fashion Week. However, Eric suddenly wondered who the lowly was in this time and space. Chapter 564. Eric had thought that attending Emily's fashion show would be a piece of cake, but the next day, Emily, who had received Eric's promise, once again came to the manor in East Hampton in a serious manner. Only then did Eric realize that Emily's plan was far more complicated than just having Eric attend a fashion show. The whole thing was a marketing campaign planned by Emily, using the gimmick that Eric would be attending the Brighton Fashion Company's new product launch. Emily had sent out invitations to many Hollywood stars. Since Eric, a Hollywood mogul, was about to attend, many stars, who had to consider their schedules before attending the fashion shows of top brands like Chanel and Givenchy, all agreed to attend. Through outstanding media PR, in just a few days, the originally unknown Brighton Fashion Company had frequently appeared on various entertainment and fashion news, due to the news that many Hollywood stars would be attending the show. The New York Fashion Week had just begun, and half of the limelight had already been stolen by Brighton Fashion Company. At the same time, Emily and the Pakula sisters were personally preparing Eric's outfit for tonight's fashion show. In the hall of the manor, there were 3 rows of men's clothes and a large pile of men's shoes. Most men didn't like to constantly try on clothes like women, and Eric was no exception. Watching Emily Brighton pick out a very stream of consciousness silver-white pendant from a large pile of jewelry and walk towards him, Eric, who had been tormented for more than an hour, finally couldn't help but explode. "Stop, Emily, if you dare to hang that necklace around my neck, I won't go anywhere tonight." Joanna and Eva snickered at the same time, and Emily curled her lips. "What a boring man. And this isn't a necklace, it's an imitation of the tassels of a military uniform," Emily said as she held the necklace in front of her and gestured at it. Eric zipped up his black jacket, feeling that the size of the black jacket was a bit small. However, after more than an hour of choosing, Eric really didn't want to torment himself anymore. He stretched his somewhat tense body and said, "This is fine. I'm not a woman. If I dress up too much, people will doubt my sexual orientation." "Only idiots will doubt your sexual orientation," Emily retorted as she helplessly put the pendant back into the jewelry box. Seeing Eric zipping up his jacket, she walked over unhappily and reached out to help Eric unzip it again. "Don't you think this jacket is a bit tight? It doesn't need to be zipped up, it's just open." Eric blocked Emily's little hand and unzipped it himself. "Who would wear it if it's just open?" "This is a sample, you only need to wear it once tonight," Emily said as she took out a brooch. When she saw Eric's expression, she raised it up and showed it to him. "This is the company's logo, you have to pin it on your jacket." When Eric saw the word Brighton on the brooch, he reluctantly allowed Emily to pin it on his chest. Looking at himself in the mirror, he frowned. Isn't the gold color a little too conspicuous? It's a little out of place. It's a little out of place, but no one will pay attention to it. Furthermore, I had a model try it on, and it's the best way to take photos, Emily explained. When Eric heard Emily's words, he smiled. I think I understand now. Since you want me to be your company's spokesperson, shouldn't we talk about the endorsement fee first? Emily took a few steps back and looked at Eric's outfit for the last time. Then, she went up with Eva to help Eric adjust his collar. When she heard Eric's joke, she also joked. Sure, you can have as much endorsement fee as you want. I'll deduct it from your dividends in the company at the end of the year. Eric shrugged. Just when he was about to say something, he heard a baby crying in the nursery. He subconsciously wanted to walk over, but Emily pulled him back. You can't carry the baby now. If your clothes are wet by the baby's pee, we'll have wasted the entire afternoon. I'll do it. Joanna made a reassuring look at Eric and walked into the nursery. Eric looked at Joanna carrying the baby in the nursery, and then looked at Emily, who was wearing a standard black business suit, and asked, Chris will be back soon. When are you going to get married? Emily paused for a moment. A trace of worry appeared on her face. She was a very smart woman. When she thought of what had happened recently, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Eric. Eric, you didn't come up with this idea behind the scenes, right? Eric immediately played dumb. What did you say? Noticing the guilty look on Eric's face, Emily immediately confirmed her guess and complained. You're so bad. You don't want to get married and live a carefree life all day. But you came up with the idea of getting Jeffrey and my parents to force me and Chris to get married. They've been driving me crazy these days. Eric no longer denied it and said with a smirk, I'm doing this for your own good. You see, I have a son and a daughter now. When you have a child, no matter if it's a boy or a girl, we can arrange the marriage. Emily rolled her eyes at Eric, but didn't continue the topic that troubled her. The company's fashion show was scheduled for 7 o'clock in the evening. After packing up, although it was not yet 3 o'clock in the afternoon, East Hampton was more than 100 kilometers away from Manhattan. Eric and the others had to leave for Manhattan early. Sitting in the car, Emily skillfully told Eric about today's arrangement. The fashion show starts at 7 o'clock and lasts for about 40 minutes. Then Vogue magazine will take a set of photos for you, which will be used as the cover of the next issue. This is what I've discussed with them. In exchange, they will do a special report for our fashion brand. After that, we've arranged a celebration party at Kiowa Hotel. Eric, I hope you can stay at the party for at least an hour. Those stars are all here for you. Eric nodded. After a simple calculation, he estimated that it would be after 10 o'clock in the evening. It would take at least 2 hours to drive from Manhattan to East Hampton. He definitely wouldn't be able to make it back by tonight. Fortunately, Eric had originally planned to go to Luc Besson's set tomorrow to take a look. Eric suddenly thought of another question. Emily, didn't you say that the longest fashion show is only 10 minutes? Why is it 40 minutes? Emily explained. The fashion show is 10 minutes long, but according to the usual practice, all fashion shows will start half an hour later. This half hour is reserved for the guests, fashion buyers, and media to communicate. It was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon when they arrived at the base of New York Fashion Week, near Bryant Park in Manhattan. Emily hurriedly left a few words, leaving Eva and an assistant to accompany Eric, and hurriedly left to make the final preparations. If Central Park was the size of a palm, Bryant Park, located in Midtown Manhattan, was at most the size of a fingernail. As the base of New York Fashion Week, several white tents were set up on the lawn of Bryant Park. The park was crowded inside and outside, and the lights flashed from time to time. Although Eric's outfit was not bad, it could only be described as conservative compared to the grotesque crowd around him. In order not to attract attention, Eric put on a big pair of sunglasses and picked a hat to cover his face. He completely became a passerby. Eva Pakula, who was participating in New York Fashion Week for the first time, was quite excited. Although she was one of the models walking the show tonight, she had been training for many days. Coupled with her special identity, she didn't wait backstage like the other models, so she took Eric around. Eric took a picture with Eva in front of an exquisite luxury brand logo. As soon as he walked away, he saw a familiar girl with exquisite makeup immediately take over Eric's position. She began to strike various poses, allowing the photographer to take photos. Eric curiously asked Eva and the female assistant who didn't have a strong presence, "Are these things really that attractive to you?" "Of course, I have my eyes on a Chanel bag, but unfortunately I can't afford it now. My sister only gives me $2,000 a month as pocket money, so I can only wait for myself to earn money," Eva said with a little bitterness, holding Eric's arm. Eric just smiled. After spending a few days together, Eric could see that Eva was a straightforward girl who didn't know how to hide her thoughts. Eric liked this kind of girl. As far as Eric knew, Joanna treated her sister well. Not only did she buy her a small apartment in Manhattan, but she also paid for her model training. She took good care of Eva in every possible way. The $2,000 that Eva mentioned was pocket money in the literal sense. This amount of money was probably more than the monthly living expenses of the aunts in Manhattan. After hearing Eva's words, the assistant who had been following them pointed at the girl who had taken the photo with Eric and Eva and said, "Mr. Williams, are you talking about them?" "Yes," Eric nodded. The assistant said with some disdain, "Mr. Williams, actually, most of them are here to freeload." Noticing Eric's puzzled look, the assistant continued, "Only a small number of celebrities have received formal invitations to the Fashion Week. Most of them are just small-time celebrities and models who are eager to become famous. They don't even have any invitations. They just come to the Fashion Week to pose for some photos, or wait for some well-known brands to finish their shows. Then they'll be taken into the show for a few photos. This way, it'll be convenient for them to publish articles in magazines, such as XXX's stunning appearance at New York Fashion Week. This is a good way for stars to maintain, or even increase their fame without any film or TV work." After hearing this, Eric smiled and said to Eva, "You're also one of those freeloaders, right?" Eva said with some pride, "Yes, but they're freeloaders from Chanel, Givenchy, and Valentino. It's useless. As long as I stay by Mr. Eric Williams' side, I'll be on the front page of an entertainment magazine tomorrow." Eric nodded solemnly. "You're so scheming." Eva immediately betrayed her teammate. "Haha, this is what Emily taught me." The three of them strolled around until 6 o'clock. Eric's female assistant received a phone call and reminded the two of them to get ready. She then led the two of them to a tent on the lawn of Bryant Park. Emily was talking to a middle-aged man with a big beard. When she saw Eric and Eva, she brought the middle-aged man over and introduced, "Eric, this is Mr. Jim Kotelis, the purchasing director of Marks & Spencer in the UK. Mr. Williams, nice to meet you. I like your movies very much." The middle-aged man warmly shook hands with Eric. Eric exchanged some pleasantries with the other party. Seeing that people were starting to enter the red carpet, Emily gave some instructions to her assistant. She then got Eric to remove his hat and glasses and said, "Eric, although you're a big shot, I still have a lot of people to entertain. You don't mind going in early, right?" Eric smiled and said, "No problem." After Eric finished speaking, he walked towards the red carpet under the guidance of the staff. Many people had already received the news that Eric would appear tonight, and the number of people gathered around the entrance of the other tents was obviously far greater than the number of people gathered around the entrance of the other tents. When they saw Eric walking on the red carpet with a tall blonde, there was a commotion in the crowd. Eric even heard a few female screams. The cameras flashed crazily. With a faint smile, Eric waved to the crowd. Immediately, there was a burst of cheers. If it wasn't for the security and chains blocking them, they probably wouldn't have been able to hold themselves back. Although there were reporters asking all kinds of questions from time to time, Eric remained silent throughout. After posing for a series of photos, Eric walked into the show with Eva on his arm. "Okay, your mission is complete." Eva enjoyed the attention she received. She intimately rubbed against Eric and said, "I'm going to prepare for the show." After she finished speaking, she hurried backstage. Eric looked at the dimly lit stage. The white stage was empty, but there were already people sitting on the stairs on both sides of the stage. After the staff sent Eric to the stage, he turned around and left. Eric remembered that Emily told him where he was, so he walked over after a short while. As soon as he walked in, Eric saw a red figure occupying his spot. Although the lighting wasn't too bright, Eric could still tell that it was an Asian woman. The girl had neat and tidy short hair that reached her ears. She was wearing a bright red shirt with a slightly open collar. She wore a pair of slim pants that accentuated her two slender and beautiful legs. On her feet was a pair of very heroic black leather boots. Although Eric didn't immediately recognize the woman, he thought of someone else. Chapter 565. Eric was not thinking of a real person, but his favorite female character in the Resident Evil series, the mysterious, beautiful, and powerful Chinese agent Ada Wong. After sizing up the Chinese lady who had taken his seat again, Eric realized that her outfit was exactly the same as Ada Wong's in the Resident Evil novel he had written based on the game's plot a few years ago. In the novel, Eric's description of Ada Wong didn't follow the Cheongsam style of the game's previous generations. Instead, it was the short-haired red-dressed queen's outfit from the 6th generation game. Noticing that someone was approaching, the girl, who seemed to be absent-minded, looked up and saw Eric looking at her with a smile. She immediately showed a confused expression. The two faced each other, and Eric also recognized her. In his memory, she was the Chinese actress Kylie who played Lady Death in X-Men 2. Although Lady Death had the same powerful self-recovery ability as Wolverine in the Marvel Comics universe, unfortunately, there was no protagonist aura to protect her in the movie version. After a few short scenes, she was eliminated. Noticing that Eric was looking at her without saying a word, Kylie felt even more nervous. Although Resident Evil had not been established yet, the news had spread throughout Hollywood. Kylie's agent thought that she might be able to fight for the role of Ada Wong, so when she learned that Eric was about to attend the New York Fashion Week fashion show, she spent a lot of effort to get an invitation letter. Although Brighton Fashion Company, run by Emily's family, was only a mid-range clothing brand, Emily invited several A-list Hollywood superstars to attend because of Eric. Of course, it was impossible for Kylie, who was not famous, not to mention a Chinese actress, to get a front-row seat. She couldn't even afford it. However, Kylie's agent gave her an idea, which was to enter the venue early, find the seat with Eric's name written on it, remove the label and sit in it herself. This way, she could get a chance to interact with Eric. This was also a very common method used by many small celebrities who couldn't get a VIP invitation letter to get a seat in the fashion show. Because the big brands often came later, some small celebrities and models who wanted to be famous used this method. When the main star entered the venue, they would find that their seat was occupied. However, the fashion show was about to start, so they could only squeeze with the people in the front row. As long as they didn't encounter a particularly serious brand, this method would often succeed. The front row of many fashion shows was often very crowded. Most of the time it was not because there were not enough seats, but because there were additional guests. It seemed that plans could never keep up with changes. Kylie, who had made all the plans, did not expect Eric to come in so early. Eric looked at Kylie's flustered appearance and shook his head gently. "Young mistress, that's not right. Ada is a woman who will remain 100% calm and confident even in the face of desperate situations." Kylie saw the faint smile on the corner of Eric's mouth and realized that the other party was not angry. She quickly calmed down from her panic and stood up to extend her small hand to Eric. "Hello, Mr. Williams. My name is Kylie." "Hello." Eric shook hands with her and looked at the seat beside him with the name Nicolas Cage written on it. He sat down casually and gestured to Kylie, who was still standing there, to sit down. Kylie sat down a little reservedly. Thinking of Eric's words just now, she straightened her body slightly, but the faint lack of confidence in her expression still lingered. Therefore, for a moment, she actually forgot all the words she had prepared. In Hollywood, black people also had to fight for a long time, and due to legal factors before they could barely get a place. They could no longer only play negative roles such as thieves and liars. However, since the birth of Hollywood, Asians had never obtained any significant position in this field. If it were not for Ada Wong's Chinese identity in Resident Evil, who Kylie would not have any confidence to sit here and interact with this young tycoon who had suddenly risen in Hollywood in recent years. Even so, she was still very worried that the movie version would change Ada Wong into a Caucasian or other race. Although it was the first time they met, as a trans-migrator from the East, Eric's sense of intimacy with Hu Kylie was almost instinctive. Seeing that the girl did not speak, Eric took the initiative to ask, "Miss Hu, I seem to have seen you somewhere before. Are you an actress?" Hu Kylie quickly nodded. "Yes, Mr. Williams. You can call me Kelly. I played a role in Growing Pains. In addition, I also had roles in the 8th movie, Friday the 13th, starring Mickey Locke, and the biopic The Gate starring Fong Kimmer." Listening to Hu Kylie's nervous tone, as if she was reciting a resume, Eric smiled. Although Eric had heard of the movies Hu Kylie mentioned, he had never seen them. Noticing Eric's chuckle, Hu Kylie could not help but lower her head again. These movies were not worth mentioning to Eric, a big director whose cumulative box office in North America was more than $1 billion. Not to mention that she only had an insignificant role in the movie. There were more and more people in the show. Just as Eric was about to continue speaking, he heard a man's magnetic voice. "Eric, it's so nice to see you again. How have you been?" Eric turned his head and saw Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda walking over side by side. He got up to greet them. As the male and female leads of Ghost in this world, Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda had been doing well in Hollywood in the past 2 years, and had always maintained their status as A-list superstars. The fact that the couple in Ghost could attend this show together would definitely be greatly hyped in the newspapers tomorrow. The impact would definitely not be much worse than Eric's. "Long time no see, Nick." Eric hugged Nicolas Cage and turned to Bridget Fonda. "Bridget, you've become much prettier." Bridget Fonda came forward and kissed Eric's cheek affectionately. She said, "Thank you for your compliment, Eric. But no matter how pretty I am, it's useless. You must have forgotten about me, and Nick." The three of them walked to the seats in the stands. When Hu Kylie saw Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda appear at the same time, a trace of envy flashed in her eyes. She could not help but stand up. Cage just glanced at Hu Kylie and started chatting with Eric again. Bridget Fonda curiously sized up Hu Kylie's outfit and said to Eric with some confusion, "Eric, aren't you going to introduce this lady to us? This is Hu Kylie, a friend of mine. She's also an actress," Eric introduced. In order to save Hu Kylie's face, he did not mention that they had just met. Hu Kylie also realized Eric's good intentions. Suppressing the faint gratitude in her heart, she took the initiative to greet Eric and Bridget Fonda. Seeing Eric and company sit down, she also quietly sat beside Eric. As soon as he sat down, Cage eagerly asked, "Eric, I've watched Jurassic Park several times. It's really great. However, why haven't I heard any news about your new work recently?" Eric shook his head and said with a smile, "Because I haven't found a script that interests me for the time being, and I have too many things to deal with, so I might have to wait a long time for my next movie. What about you guys? What have you been busy with recently?" "We just received a script from Universal, and we haven't decided if we want to act in it yet," Cage said as he glanced at Bridget Fonda. "The two of you together?" Cage nodded and said, "Michael Eisner personally invited us. The pay is also very high, but we haven't thought about it yet." Eric also understood Cage's hesitation. Although the couple formed a strong coupling effect in Ghosts of the Apes, which led to them working together again, they would definitely receive a sky-high pay. However, if the movie failed, this coupling effect would be greatly affected, and it might even become a one-time expense. Therefore, they were very careful when choosing a script. "Eric, why don't I talk about the script and you give us some advice?" Bridget Fonda sat beside Cage and leaned forward slightly, looking at Eric with a look of anticipation. Eric thought about it and did not refuse. He said, "Okay, but now is not the time. The show is about to begin." "Then let's do it at the cocktail party later," Cage immediately agreed. The two of them had just chatted for a while when they saw the father and daughter walk in. Donald Trump, who had a trendy hairstyle, saw Eric and quickly walked over in excitement, completely ignoring his daughter's rolling eyes beside him. Eric was a little surprised by Trump's appearance, But he quickly remembered that Emily had said that there would be a celebration cocktail party at the Kiowa Hotel after the show, and the Kiowa Hotel in Manhattan happened to be a property of Trump Corporation. "Eric, we meet again." Trump gave Eric a bear hug, as if they were old friends. Eric glanced at Trump's hairstyle and teased, "Donald, you've become more handsome." "Thank you, Eric, but I think so too." "Dad is so stupid. He's obviously mocking you." A crisp little voice immediately sounded beside him. Trump was a little embarrassed. Eric looked at Ivanka Trump, whom he had not seen for a long time, and immediately pretended to be surprised. He said, "Wow, whose little beauty is this? I can't recognize her." Ivanka raised her chin slightly and snorted proudly, completely ignoring Eric. "Annie, don't be so rude." Trump immediately scolded. Although she was only 12 years old, Ivanka, who was 1.5 meters tall, rolled her eyes at Trump without hesitation. Eric couldn't help but laugh at the sight of the girl's delicate appearance. He looked at the simple pale yellow dress that Ivanka was wearing and asked, "Annie, don't you feel that you're missing something?" Ivanka immediately looked down at her clothes, and after a while, she looked up and said, "What's missing?" "A doll. I think you can hug an extra large one now." Ivanka pursed her lips in a proud manner as she dragged her father toward the spectator stands. She had no intention of paying any further attention to Eric. The Trump seats were arranged to the right of Bridget Fonda. In order to make it easier for them to chat, Eric sat down between the two groups. Kylie looked at Eric, who was sitting in the middle of a few people talking and laughing. Before she could feel disappointed, a lady with a work pass around her neck came out from backstage. She glanced at the seats and quickly stared at Kylie. The lady walked forward and said, "Miss, may I see your invitation?" Kylie was shocked, but she still took out the invitation from her handbag and handed it to the lady. The lady just glanced at it and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Hu. There are a lot of guests today, and the front row is already very crowded, so please go back to your seat, okay?" The conversation between the two quickly attracted the attention of the few people who were chatting. Eric recognized the lady with the work pass around her neck as the female assistant who had accompanied him and Eva earlier. Seeing Kylie's helpless look, he took the initiative to help the lady out. "Kelly is my friend. If it's possible, let her sit in the front row." The female assistant saw that Eric had spoken personally and did not dare to directly refuse, but she still said, "Mr. Williams, it's not a problem to squeeze a little, but Miss Hu is now sitting in Ms. Winter's seat." Eric glanced at his empty seat and saw that Kylie had casually sat on his left. He did not expect that the seat of the famous editor-in-chief of Vogue, Anna Wintour, would be next to him. He also did not expect that Emily would arrange for Kylie to sit next to him. Although he did not know Anna Wintour, Eric knew that Emily must have put in a lot of effort to invite this fashion queen. It would not be worth it to mess up Emily's arrangements for these small details, so Eric waved at Kylie and asked her to sit next to him. The female assistant breathed a sigh of relief, but did not leave. She stood near the stands and stared at the guests who came in from time to time. She was probably sent by Emily to guard the VIP seats. Sure enough, in the next few minutes, the female assistant consecutively asked a few small celebrities who came to the front row to leave. More and more people came to the show. Seeing that almost everyone had arrived, the female assistant was about to leave when she was stopped by Eric. "Williams, what's the matter?" The female assistant walked up to Eric and slightly leaned over to ask. Eric curled his finger at the female assistant. When she squatted down and leaned closer, he said softly, "Do me a little favor." Hearing Eric's whisper, the female assistant nodded with a smile. She glanced at Ivanka beside him and hurriedly got up to leave. Chapter 566. 3 minutes before the show started, Eric saw Emily walking into the show with Anna Wintour, the editor-in-chief of Vogue. Noticing the two of them walking towards him, Eric took the initiative to stand up. He was still very curious about this famous fashion devil. Anna Wintour had a bob, just like in all the videos, but she didn't wear her iconic Prada sunglasses. "Eric, this is Ms. Anna Wintour." "Anna, this is Eric." Although they all knew each other, Emily still introduced them formally. "Hello, Mr. Williams. Nice to meet you." Anna Wintour reached out to Eric warmly. Anna Wintour's voice was a little hoarse, giving off a sense of tiredness, but like many elites, she spoke very quickly. Eric shook hands with her and said, "Me too, Ms. Wintour. Just call me Eric." They chatted for a while, and Anna Wintour went to her seat. Eric was about to sit in his seat when Emily gently pulled him. Eric had no choice but to get Cage and Bridget Fonda to move to the left and sit next to Anna Wintour. As soon as the three of them sat down, Emily's female assistant came out from backstage with a brown bear in her arms. She came to Eric and said, "Mr. Williams, time is tight. I only found this. Is it okay?" Eric found that the female assistant was holding a teddy bear. He thought of a certain R-rated comedy that ruined his childhood and subconsciously showed a wicked smile. He took the teddy bear from the female assistant and said, "Yes, thank you." The female assistant smiled shyly, nodded to Emily next to her, and walked backstage again. Many invited Hollywood stars in the show were looking at Eric from time to time. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many media reporters, these people would have put aside their reservations and come over. Seeing a staff member inexplicably give Eric a teddy bear, most people seemed to have found a legitimate reason, and looked over blatantly. Eric made a look to Anna Wintour, who was about to talk to him, to wait. He got up and walked to Ivanka, who was a few steps away, and handed the teddy bear to the girl. "Come, Minnie, this is your mascot tonight." Ivanka subconsciously took it. Seeing that everyone around her was looking at her, the girl was too embarrassed to throw the teddy bear away. She could only hold it in front of her obediently while looking at her father beside her for help. Donald Trump, however, was also smiling. He was a person who liked to be in the limelight. After Jurassic Park was released, Ivanka once again appeared in the movie with a doll, and the whole world recognized her cute image. As her father, of course, he felt very proud. Seeing Eric stuffing the teddy bear into Ivanka's arms, many of the people present instantly understood what was going on. Many of them even let out soft chuckles, and the reporters standing around the periphery all raised their cameras, and the entire venue was instantly filled with flashes of magnesium light. Seeing that Eric was shameless enough to get close to her, she asked a nearby reporter to help her take a photo. Ivanka maintained her cute image. After the photo was taken, she whispered in Eric's ear, "You bad guy, I will never act in your movie again." "That won't do. I have paid for it." "Miss Trump, are you planning to go back on your word? What about this time?" Ivanka raised the teddy bear in her hands. She did not know why, but she felt that Eric's gaze towards the teddy bear had a hint of evil. "How about $1,000? You are richer than my father, but you are only willing to pay $1,000. You are too stingy." Ivanka heard this topic and subconsciously began to bargain. This made Eric almost laugh out loud. Although Loretta had turned into a young girl, the little money grubber aura that Eric had unintentionally planted in her had remained. Eric said calmly, "Why don't you name a price?" Ivanka considered for a while. She plucked up her courage and said, $10,000. After the young girl finished speaking, she seemed to feel that she was asking for too much. Her face turned red and she quickly said, "I want to save up for my future school fees. When the time comes, I will not have to spend my father's money." "All right, $10,000 it is." Eric pretended to be pained and said. Ivanka completely ignored Eric's expression. Hearing that he agreed, her beautiful eyes suddenly lit up. She stretched out her hand and said, "Give it to me." Eric spread out his hands and said, "I don't have it now. After the fashion show, I will get someone to give it to you." The girl solemnly reminded him, "Then don't forget." Eric returned to his seat. Anna Wintour, who had been watching his every move, immediately said, "Eric, you are a very interesting person." "Thank you, Anna." Eric smiled and nodded. He felt that Anna Wintour's attitude was a little too enthusiastic. After chatting for a while, Eric then understood that Anna Wintour wanted to invite him for an interview with Vogue. This woman was very eloquent. If it weren't for Emily's interruption on the other side, Eric almost couldn't help but agree. The plan did not succeed. Anna Wintour also did not show any signs of uneasiness. Half an hour later, the fashion show officially began. Amidst the strange and melodious music, the models started to walk on the runway. Eric did not feel anything about the outfits of the models on the runway. However, when he heard the accompanying music, he was invigorated. The lead singer of the song was a woman with a slightly hoarse voice. She sang in a low voice like a ghost in the lonely night. "Eric, this is a song by the Irish band The Cranberries. It's called Pretty." The lead singer is Dorothy O'Riordan. This band's songs are very interesting. If you're interested, you can buy a record and listen to it. Anna Winter noticed Eric's expression and took the initiative to explain. Eric nodded slightly to express his gratitude. At the same time, he secretly remembered the name of the song and the information about the Cranberries. Apart from the song Pretty, there was nothing much for Eric to watch in the rest of the show. More than 10 minutes later, the fashion show was over. Most people left for the next show. Emily arranged for Eric to go to a nearby studio to take several sets of photos for the cover of Vogue. It was already 8:30 when he finished. Eric had just appeared in the banquet hall of the Kaiwa Hotel. Some people who had been waiting for a long time took the initiative to come over. In addition to Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda, Emily also invited 7 or 8 Hollywood stars. Of course, these people did not expect to learn anything from Eric right away. Their main purpose was to get acquainted with him. As long as they made an impression on Eric, the chances of them getting roles in Firefly movies in the future would be greatly increased. After a round of socializing, Eric, Cage and Fongdao sat down on a sofa and talked about the movie before the fashion show. It's probably the story of an introverted detective in Manhattan and a waitress in a restaurant. Because of an accident, the detective found that he forgot to bring money after dinner. He happened to have a lottery ticket in his hand, so he made an agreement with the waitress that if he won the lottery, they would share the money equally. Later, the detective did win the lottery. After some hesitation, he finally made up his mind and gave the $1 million prize to the waitress. At the same time, the two of them successfully became a couple. Cage's eloquence was not very good. If it was a completely unfamiliar story, Eric would probably shake his head at this time. However, he remembered this movie, and the amazing thing was that the male and female lead of this movie in the original Spacetime happened to be Cage and Fongda. The movie was called Alluring Tales. In Eric's opinion, this movie did not have many highlights, but it was not a bad movie either. It could only be said that it was moderate. What the two said next would not do much good to their careers, but it would not damage the role of the two of them as a couple either. Eric told the two of them his opinion truthfully. "In that case, we'd better not take it." Bridget Fongdao heard Eric's comment and said. Cage seemed to have the same awareness. Eric smiled and said, "If you don't plan to take this movie, it's best not to let Michael Eisner know about us. Otherwise he will definitely hate me." "Of course, I won't talk about this casually." Cage laughed. He also knew about the disputes between Michael Eisner and Eric. "Since we're not taking this movie, Eric, do you have any suitable roles for me?" Eric shook his head honestly. Firefly has been focusing on big special effects movies for the past 2 years. Because the main characters of these movies are special effects, in order to save some costs, most of the time, they will use some second-tier actors with excellent acting skills. Cage shook his head regretfully. He thought for a while and said, "Eric, I think the movie Mr. and Mrs. Smith that you worked with Sony Pictures last time was very good. The Hong Kong director seems to be called John Woo," Bridget Fongda said. Cage nodded. "Yes, John Woo. I like his style very much. The action design is so cool. Eric, do you think there's a possibility of working with him?" Eric's expression was a little strange. He thought to himself, is this the inertia of history? John is shooting another movie recently. However, he signed a total of 3 contracts with us. There's another one next year. If you're interested, I happen to have a suitable script for you. Because there was no progress on the script for Face/Off, Eric did not tell Cage the specific plot. Both sides made a preliminary agreement. Seeing that Cage had gotten the contract, Bridget Fongda of course did not want to be outdone. However, for this second-tier actress in the original Spacetime, Eric could not think of a suitable script for her. He could only tactfully say that he would talk about it when there was a suitable movie in the future. Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fongda were not people who had free time. After chatting with Eric, the two of them hurriedly left the party. Emily, who had been socializing at the party, came to Eric with a glass of champagne. "Emily, where's Eva?" Eric looked around and asked. "They're shooting a portrait. It'll be used in the magazine tomorrow. It'll probably be very late," Emily explained. Then, she rolled her eyes at Eric. "She's Joan's sister. Don't be so naughty." Eric could only roll his eyes speechlessly and change the topic. "Didn't you talk to Anna Wintour before? Why would she want to invite me to participate in Vogue's photo shoot? Vogue is a fashion magazine, right? If Anna Wintour didn't even know how to fight for such an opportunity, do you think she would have become the chief editor of Vogue before the age of 30? Moreover, after Anna Wintour became the chief editor of Vogue, she has been imitating Tina Brown's way of thinking when she ran Vanity Fair." Hearing Emily mention Vanity Fair, Eric understood. Vanity Fair's main focus was on the private lives of upper-class stars and rich people. Since Vogue was imitating Vanity Fair, it was not too strange that they would invite him. Seeing Emily sipping the champagne gently to moisten her throat, Eric smiled. "I've done everything I should do tonight. What do you think of the effect?" "Of course it's great." "Eric, thank you." Emily immediately became excited. With the accumulated news material tonight, the brand of Brighton Fashion Company will immediately spread throughout the United States. Do you still remember the purchasing director of Marks & Spencer's department store before the show started? Eric nodded and recalled the image of a bearded middle-aged man. "I've been talking to him for a long time, but he had no intention of relenting. However, when he saw you at the scene, as well as Nicolas Cage and the others, he just promised me an order of $5 million USD. Although many buyers are still considering it, the number of orders reached tonight has already doubled that of last year. Eric, I plan to invest in 20 stores in major cities. What do you think?" "I don't know much about this. You can arrange it yourself." Emily blinked. "I mean, if we invest $500,000 per store, it will cost about $10 million. Although $10 million was not a lot, it was impossible that Brighton Fashion Company could not afford it." Noticing Eric's confusion, Emily took the initiative to say, "You guessed right. The company is out of money. I spent more than $5 million on this show alone." Chapter 567. Eric felt that the cost of tonight's fashion show and the cocktail party would be more than enough, let alone $5 million. Although there were several big stars, they had all come for his sake. He estimated that they would only take a few tens of thousands of dollars as a token appearance fee. "Emily, I'm very curious. How did you spend $5 million? Inviting top designers, fashion models, media, guest appearance fees, TV advertising and marketing expenses." Emily started counting the expenses for Eric with her slender fingers. When she was about to finish counting, Eric was worried that Chris would take off her heels and continue counting. He quickly interrupted. "Okay, I believe you." Emily seemed to be a little unsatisfied. She added, "There's a small charity auction later. Our company has agreed to donate another $200,000 on top of the auction proceeds. When Chris comes back, you can ask him to do this," Emily said. "Chris might not come back until the end of the month. I want to start these projects as soon as possible. Why don't you write me a check?" Eric was a little confused. Isn't the matter in Europe finished? Why isn't he coming back? Emily rolled her eyes. It's all your fault. Eric immediately understood. He shook his head and said, You can just hold the wedding for a while. Anyway, you're living together now. Don't talk about this. Okay, in that case, prepare the necessary documents. I'll write you a check. Then it's settled. The $10 million is the company's debt financing. Emily's eyes were sly, but she was a little guilty. Eric smiled. Compared to other industries, he was not too interested in Brighton fashion, which was only about $300 million. Therefore, he had no intention of increasing his shareholding. He said, Let's do as you say. Just as the two were chatting about trivial matters, a middle-aged man with white hair in his 50s walked over and greeted Emily. Hey Emily, your show tonight was really amazing. That fellow Paul must be very proud to have a daughter like you. How has he been recently? Emily looked at the man and put away her excited expression. She just politely shook the man's hand and said, "My father is very good. Mr. Wexney, thank you for your concern." After the middle-aged man greeted Emily, he took the initiative to extend his hand to Eric and said enthusiastically, "Mr. Williams, hello. I'm Leslie Wexney." "Hello, Mr. Wexney." Eric felt that Emily did not seem to like the man, so he did not show too much enthusiasm. Leslie Wexney let go of Eric's hand and turned to Emily. He said, "Emily, now I suddenly feel that the conditions I offered last time were indeed a little inappropriate. Maybe I can raise the price to $400 million. If you're interested, why don't we take some time to talk about it?" Emily shook her head. "Mr. Wexney, it's very difficult for the same person to take advantage of others twice. I think there's no need for us to talk about this matter anymore." "That's not good, Emily. If you want to become a qualified businesswoman, remember, you can't be too absolute about anything." After Leslie Wexney said this, he looked at Eric, who was standing beside Emily with some envy. He nodded slightly and walked away. "Who is this gentleman? You don't seem to like him very much." Eric waited for the man to walk away before asking. "The chairman of Ltd." Emily blurted out. Then she realized that Eric definitely did not understand what the abbreviation of Ltd meant. She explained, "The chairman of Limited Brands. Ltd has several good fashion brands, including a lingerie brand and a sports fashion brand. Because my family's Brighton fashion company mainly focuses on the daily clothes of the white-collar class in the city, it has no competition with Ltd. So Leslie Wexney and my father are good friends. However, he recently wanted to buy our family's company in order to expand the business scope of Ltd's fashion brands, but I rejected him." Eric said, "These are all normal business practices. You don't have to dislike him, do you?" "If that's all, of course I don't have to dislike him. Brighton Fashion Company was founded by my grandfather. Other than the 30% shares in your hands, the rest is in the hands of my father, 2 uncles, and an aunt. After I rejected him 3 months ago, he secretly contacted my 2 uncles and aunt, wanting to buy their shares at a high price. 45% of the shares. He only offered $150 million. If my father hadn't discovered this by chance and stopped his 3 sisters-in-law's foolish actions in time, he would have become the largest shareholder of the fashion company." Looking at Emily gnashing her teeth, Eric said, "If that's the case, then you should run the company well. In the future, you might be able to reverse the situation and buy over his company." Emily proudly raised her chin, not hiding her little ambition at all. "I already had this plan. Ltd's market value is only a little more than $1 billion. Give me 5 years and I will definitely catch up with him. At that time, I will directly swallow Ltd. At the same time, Brighton Fashion Company can also be listed. Since Leslie Wexney wants to take advantage of the second time, then I will let him taste the feeling of losing control of the company." Eric smiled and asked, "Why do you always say that he wants to take advantage of the second time? Did he take advantage of the first time?" "Yes, but that was 10 years ago. At that time, he only used $1 million to buy Victoria's Secret underwear brand. Now Victoria's Secret is worth more than $1 billion, accounting for 70% of Ltd's market value." Emily said and added, "I heard that the original founder of Victoria's Secret, Roy Raymond, recently jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge and killed himself." Eric rubbed a wine glass in his hand. When Emily finished speaking, he suddenly said, "Emily, if you launch a hostile takeover of Ltd now, how much would it cost to get control?" "What did you say?" Emily thought she heard wrong. Eric repeated, "I said if you want to get control of Ltd now, how much would it cost?" "Eric, are you kidding? I never thought you were a sympathetic person. Moreover, I think a person who doesn't even have the courage to live is not worthy of sympathy." Eric was certainly not joking, and definitely not because of sympathy. This was Victoria's Secret. Eric clearly remembered the shock he felt when he saw Victoria's Secret's annual fashion show on the cable TV channel in his previous life. "Emily, I'm not joking. I'm seriously discussing this matter with you." Emily stared at Eric for a while and said, "I'm not sure about this. You should ask Chris about this." Then let Chris come back as soon as possible, and then come up with a feasible plan. Emily suddenly lowered her voice. Eric, I know a little about the situation in Los Angeles. You should need a lot of money to buy the television network. After buying Nokia, Firefly's investment is only about $600 million, right? So, since you need so much money, the $600 million here won't be of much help. It's better to use it to buy a company that I'm interested in. When Emily heard Eric say this, she was a little excited. Then she immediately said, Eric, this is completely your idea. It has nothing to do with me. Eric laughed and said, It seems like you're the one who instigated me. Emily knew that Eric was joking. She said, Anyway, we can't let Chris know. If he really thinks that it's my idea, then this matter won't work. It's not like you don't know his stubborn character of sticking to his own principles. Eric teased, Aren't you the one who calls the shots in your family? Emily was a little embarrassed. I only have the right to speak on some small matters. Okay then. When Chris comes back, I'll talk to him personally about this matter. Halfway through the cocktail party, the charity auction arranged by Emily was about to begin. Everyone knew what a charity auction was. Many people bought things, but they didn't even know who they donated their money to. Eric wasn't interested in this at all. He stood quietly in the corner and looked at the people in front of him. From time to time, people would offer to buy the bits and pieces donated by Hollywood stars. A figure in a black suit carefully approached Eric and greeted him in a low voice. Mr. Williams? Eric turned his head and saw that it was Kylie, who had changed out of Ada Wong's cosplay costume. Because he had been busy with the guests just now, Eric had almost forgotten about her. Actually, you look better in this costume. Eric looked at Kylie's costume and praised her. Kylie's voice was a little downcast. Mr. Williams, do you mean that I'm not suitable for the role of Ada Wong? The current Kylie did look like a weak high school girl, and the kind that made people want to trample on her. Eric couldn't compare her to the confident and valiant Ada Wong in his mind. You should have read Resident Evil, right? Ada is definitely not like you. Mr. Williams, I've practiced martial arts, and I even got a black belt in Taekwondo. Kylie said with a little urgency. But you don't have Ada's temperament. You look more like a high school girl in a horror movie who could be killed by a perverted killer at any time. Mr. Williams, why don't you give me a chance to audition? I promise I'll perform very well. Eric thought for a moment and said, Okay, give me your contact address. When the Resident Evil project starts, I'll get someone to send you an audition invitation. Kylie felt a little disappointed. She knew very well that if she really went through the audition according to the process, she might be eliminated in the first round. Kylie gently bit her red lips and hesitated for a moment. Her body slightly leaned towards Eric. Mr. Williams, maybe you can personally arrange an audition for me tonight. How about tonight? Eric narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at the girl. You're planning to do that? Kylie hesitated for a few seconds and nodded again. Yes. Eric took out a credit card from his pocket and handed it to the girl. Go get a room and wait for me inside. Kylie took the credit card and moved back 2 steps before turning around and leaving. A few minutes later, a waiter from the Kaiwa Hotel handed over a room card and Eric's credit card. Eric ignored the waiter's flirtatious expression and silently took the 2 cards. He gave the waiter a tip and once again looked at the auction stage in the hall. The auction was coming to an end. The chubby auctioneer on the stage gestured for everyone to be quiet and then said, Now let's look at the most important and most precious auction item. The auctioneer kept everyone in suspense for a moment before opening a box handed over by a waitress. He gestured to everyone in the hall. When Eric saw the item in the box, he almost dropped the wine glass in his hand. Look, this is the script of Home Alone written by Mr. Eric Williams himself. It's very precious. As you all know, Mr. Eric Williams earned $500 million at the global box office with Home Alone, and created a miracle in Firefly Pictures in just a few years. Therefore, this script is very valuable. The starting price is $100,000. $200,000. As soon as the auctioneer finished speaking, a clear female voice came from below the stage. Eric was standing at the back, so he did not hear who it was. $250,000. As soon as the girl called out the price, someone immediately raised the price. At this time, someone had already started to look for Eric in the hall, and soon found Eric standing in the corner, dumbfounded. $300,000. Once again, the price was raised by someone. Eric finally reacted and felt a little helpless. He had given this script to Joanna personally, and the woman had said that she would keep it as a collection. Now that she took it out, it was obvious that this silly woman wanted Eric to buy it himself. If it wasn't for Joanna, to be honest, Eric wouldn't have spent a penny on this pile of manuscripts. Hearing that the price of the script was raised to $500,000, Eric quickly raised his hand. $600,000. If possible, Eric would like to bid $510,000, but he could not afford to lose face. Hearing Eric's bid, everyone in the hall immediately understood, and no one raised the price. The auctioneer counted 3 times with a strange expression, and soon announced the owner of the script. Eric was thinking about how to get back the $600,000 from the silly woman. $600,000. It was enough to buy many cans of milk powder. Chapter 568. In the luxurious suite on the top floor of the Kiowa Hotel, Eric sat by the floor-to-ceiling window and casually flipped through the script of Home Alone. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional. He still remembered how smug he felt when he typed the script in front of the old-fashioned typewriter. Unknowingly, 5 years had passed. After the sound of running water came from the bathroom, Kylie walked out in a simple bathrobe. She curiously stared at Eric's back for a while. She couldn't help but move forward and kneel down on the thick carpet next to Eric. She lay on the man's knees and looked at the script in Eric's hands. Eric glanced at the woman's current posture and reached out to touch the woman's face. He asked, "Have you been to Japan?" Kylie tilted her head and rubbed her face against Eric's palm. "I went there once with a good friend 6 years ago." Eric could feel the nostalgia and yearning in Kylie's tone. He said, "Looks like you have a good impression of Japan." Women's minds were always very sharp. Kylie could hear the coldness in Eric's voice. She said, "It's okay. They're all very polite. Go put on your clothes. Let's have breakfast together." Eric didn't have any interest in continuing the topic. He pinched the woman's delicate chin and instructed her. Kylie's movements showed a trace of hesitation. From last night until now, everything that should have happened had happened. However, Eric didn't mention anything about the role again. She was very worried that after breakfast, Eric would directly ask her to leave. Seeing that Kylie didn't move, Eric guessed the woman's thoughts. He took out a personal business card from his pocket and handed it to Kylie. He said, "Resident Evil will probably start preparing next year. You have more than 4 months to prepare. When the project is ready next year, I will personally arrange an interview for you. If your performance meets my requirements, I will give the role of Ada Wong to you. So use this time well and figure out the character's characteristics. Also, it's best if you sign up for a short-term acting training class." Kylie took Eric's business card and asked nervously, "Then, what if my performance doesn't meet your expectations?" "If Ada Wong acts well, she'll be very outstanding, just like Brooke Xiaoxi in Dark War a few years ago. She only appeared for a few minutes, but she left a very deep impression on the audience. But if your performance is not up to standard, not only will it ruin the film, it will also not help your personal acting career. However, even if you don't pass the audition, I can still arrange other opportunities for you." When Kylie heard Eric's words without any promise, an unconcealable expression of disappointment immediately appeared on her face. Eric lifted the girl's chin with some dissatisfaction. "Do you think I'm one of those mediocre directors who likes to lie to women and then go back on their word?" "Mr. Williams, I didn't." Kylie's eyes flickered. "It doesn't matter if you do. Since it was your manager who arranged for you to get close to me last night, then you should tell him exactly what I said. I'm sure he'll understand what I meant. If he can't do it, then take the business card in your hand to UTA and ask for a new manager. They'll know what to do when they see my business card." "Okay, I got it." Kylie avoided Eric's gaze and said softly. Eric's fingers slid down and took off Kylie's loose bathrobe. He admired the girl's exquisite body and said firmly, "Now go and put on your clothes." In Hell's Kitchen in the middle of Manhattan, a large container truck was parked outside an old-fashioned house. There were a lot of filming equipment around it. This was the filming location of The Assassin Leon. When Eric rushed over from Kiowa Hotel, the crew was in the middle of filming. At this moment, the slightly handsome Luke Besson was discussing the scene with the two main leads. Eric had no intention of interfering. He just stood at the side quietly like a passerby. Indeed, Loretta was no longer the same Loretta. Although the male lead was still Jean Renault, the female lead had been changed to a 16-year-old girl named Melissa Grint. However, this female lead was not as precocious as many American girls. She was petite and only 1.5 meters tall. She gave people the feeling that she was underdeveloped. Although Luke Besson did not use the original Loretta, the actress he found gave people the feeling that she was more Loretta than Loretta. Today was the third day of filming. The villain Gary Oldman had not joined the crew yet. At this moment, they were filming the classic scene where Matilda and Leon met at the staircase. The filming of this scene went smoothly. There were only 5 or 6 NGs and it was passed. Although Melissa Grint's performance was different from Natalie Portman's, her acting skills were not inferior to Natalie Portman's. However, when she played the role of Matilda, who was holding a burning cigarette in her hand, asked Leon if life was only as painful as childhood, or if it was always painful, the girl vividly portrayed the female lead's feelings of loss, confusion, and disgust towards life. Even Eric, who was watching from the side, could not help but secretly applaud her. Perhaps Hollywood was really like this. There was no one who could not be replaced. Without the 12-year-old Loretta, The Assassin Leon would definitely cause less controversy in the future. It might even be able to break through the limitations of the original time and space and get nominated for a few Oscars. During lunch, the group of main creators chose a nearby restaurant to treat Eric to a meal. The 16-year-old fake Loli even excitedly chatted with Eric about her views on the role of Matilda. Eric and Luke Besson also chatted about some issues regarding the script. Eric even revealed some of the plot ideas of the style of Hurricane Rescue to Luke Besson. Luke Besson was originally very good at creating such films. It could be said that The Assassin Leon was completely different from Luke Besson's works. The two of them regretted not meeting earlier. Luke Besson immediately said that he would quickly create a script according to Eric's ideas. The afternoon filming started very smoothly. However, after more than an hour, someone noticed that Melissa Grint was frowning slightly during the filming. Melissa Grint initially said that there was nothing wrong, and that she might have eaten something unclean in the afternoon. However, when she was climbing the stairs, Melissa Grint's legs went soft and she rolled down the stairs. The whole crew was in chaos. After more than 10 minutes, the doctor arrived and checked. The problem was not serious. It was just acute appendicitis. While the crew breathed a sigh of relief, they quickly became troubled, because the hospital quickly informed them that the girl needed to undergo surgery immediately. Although the appendicitis surgery did not take too long, the follow-up recovery would definitely take at least a week or 2. And the crew, who had to burn money every day, could not afford to wait for a female lead for 2 weeks. The only consolation was that the crew had only started filming for 3 days. The loss of restarting the shoot was not great. They could immediately change the actress. Although he sympathized with the fake Loli, Eric was slightly excited. He had originally planned to return to East Hampton. Now that he encountered such a situation, he took the initiative to watch the audition tape of the female lead. Luke Besson did not object. Everyone returned to the hotel where the crew was staying. The assistant director quickly found all the audition tapes of the girls who had participated in the last few rounds of audition. There were 40 to 50 young actresses with videotapes. Eric looked through all the videotapes with some anticipation, but he did not find any girl named Natalie Portman. Then Eric lost interest in watching and quickly said goodbye to Luke Besson. On the road back to East Hampton, Eric's bodyguard and driver, Carter Moan, who had been following him for several years, saw Eric's expression through the rearview mirror. He took the initiative to ask, "Boss, are you in a bad mood?" Eric shook his head. Occasionally, I feel a little down for a few days. Carter joked. Does it happen every month? Fuck you. Huh. After being interrupted by Carter, Eric also relaxed and no longer bothered about these trivial matters. He picked up the script of Home Alone and continued to read it for fun. The black Toyota drove quickly on the Long Island Road. Eric absent-mindedly flipped through the script in his hand. Just as he was thinking about something else, he heard the car suddenly jolt a few times and came to a stop with a low creaking sound. What's wrong? Eric looked up and asked. Carter patted the steering wheel and turned his head. The car broke down. I'll go take a look. Eric also followed Carter out of the car. Carter opened the hood and a burst of thick smoke immediately spewed out. Carter waved his hand to disperse the smoke and then carefully examined the car. Eric squatted down on the side of the road, without caring about his image. He took out a cigarette from his pocket and asked, Carter, do you know how to fix tanks? Carter moaned, shook his head gently and smiled. Actually, I'm better at fixing tanks. Okay. Eric smiled and took out a lighter to light it. Carter looked up and said, Boss, we have to push the car to the side of the road first. Eric had to put away the cigarette and lighter for the time being. The two of them walked to the back of the car and slowly pushed the black Toyota to the side of the road. Eric used all his strength and said in a self-deprecating manner, I'm a billionaire. I used to sit in a car, but now I've been reduced to pushing a car myself. Carter did not back down. I'm from the Marine Corps. I used to fly Black Hawk helicopters, but now I've been reduced to driving a Japanese car. Eric smiled and said, I suddenly realized that you're very suitable as a talk show host. I can't talk for 20 minutes at a time. Let's forget it. The two of them pushed the Toyota to the side of the road. Carter walked towards the engine again. Eric knew that he could not help much, so he went to the side of the road again and squatted down. Carter checked for a while, looked up and said, Boss, it's not a big problem, but I don't have the tools. Eric looked around and asked, Where are we? To the north is Jericho City. Carter looked up. The two of them were discussing whether to call the shipping company directly or to find some repair tools nearby. A passing white Chevrolet stopped next to them. A black-haired woman in her 30s poked her head out. Gentlemen, are you in trouble? Do you need help? Yes, ma'am, if possible. Carter walked forward. Eric also stood up. The black-haired woman did not notice Eric, who was blocked by the car. When Eric stood up, the woman said, Are you Eric Williams? Yes, ma'am. Eric reached out his hand to her. Before the middle-aged woman could reply, the back door of the white Chevrolet suddenly opened. A little girl jumped out of the car and walked towards Eric in surprise. Wow, it's really Eric Williams. Mr. Williams, hello. My name is Natalie Hirschler. You can call me Nat. Eric let the little girl shake his hand with a strange expression, until the middle-aged woman helped her out. Nat, let go of Mr. Williams. Don't be so rude. Oh, Mom. The girl let go of Eric's hand, but still looked at Eric curiously. Mr. Williams, are you looking for actors in Long Island? What do you think of me? Oh well, I'm just passing by. What are you going to do in your next movie? Do you have a suitable role for me? The girl said and made a cute face. The girl's mother ignored the little girl's series of questions. She chatted with Carter for a while, and then said that she had the necessary tools at home. Mr. Williams, my house is nearby. Maybe Mr. Carter can come back with me to get the tools. No problem. Thank you. Eric nodded to the woman. Since it was Eric, the woman was not wary of them. She invited Carter to sit in the passenger seat, and then called her daughter. Nat, get in the car. We are going back. Mom, you will come back later, right? Can I stay and chat with Mr. Williams? The woman looked at Eric. Eric quickly nodded. Don't worry, ma'am. I will take good care of Nat. As long as Mr. Williams doesn't find it troublesome. Nat, don't be too naughty. I won't, Natalie Portman said immediately. She stole a glance at Eric, as if Eric would define her as a naughty girl. Chapter 569. After her mother left with Eric's chauffeur, Natalie Portman, The little girl who was still called Natalie Hirschler looked at the young man who was squatting by the side of the road in a daze. She felt very curious. In her impression, the big directors who occasionally appeared on TV were either serious, funny, or maverick. She felt that most of those people were just pretending. At this time, the guy named Eric Williams, who had a series of box office miracles, gave her a feeling that she couldn't see through him at all. Because according to normal logic, only the little boys in school would pretend in front of her. Moreover, his attire at this time was a bit out of place. A black jacket was open, revealing a t-shirt with an unknown pattern printed on it. A pair of trousers looked a bit wrinkled. If he had a colorful broom perm and bright earrings, he would be no different from the legendary biker gang. Well, he could barely be considered a handsome biker gang, much more handsome than the bald guy gang. Looking at Eric's lost expression, the little girl followed Eric's gaze to the road. Cars shuttled by, either fast or slow. Maybe he was thinking about which car to rob. Feeling that her thoughts were somewhat inexplicably funny, the girl grinned and walked to Eric's left side in her white sneakers. She then squatted down and looked at the increasing number of cars as it was time to get off work. Chrysler, Toyota, Chevrolet, Ford, BMW. The white convertible BMW was probably the most expensive. She heard that the quality of German cars was very good. After a few minutes, Natalie once again realized the identity of the guy next to her. He was a big Hollywood director and the boss of a film company, so she nudged the man next to her with her elbow. Mr. Williams. Your film company still needs small actors? Eric put out the cigarette butt in his hand and threw it into the drainage ditch next to him. At the same time, he put away the little emotion in his heart. He looked at the girl next to him and said with interest, "Yes." "Then what do you think of me?" Eric looked Natalie up and down. She was wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of khaki pants that revealed her slender calves. Her shoes were a little too big. He shook his head and said, "Too skinny." "Aren't celebrities all very thin?" The girl immediately defended herself. "When I was 10, Revlon invited me to be their child model. Also, I've already attended 2 years of drama training, and was a substitute for the female lead in the stage play Cruel. Well, even though I didn't get to perform in the end, it was enough to prove my acting ability." Eric asked with a smile. "Do you want to be a star or an actor?" Of course, I want to be a star. I don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to be a housewife who doesn't change a thing after growing up. That kind of life is simply too boring. Okay, then I'll give you a chance to be a star." Eric pointed at the car parked next to him. "Help me get the mobile phone in the car. It's in the front seat." Natalie was still thinking about how to persuade Eric to give her a chance to act in a movie. When she heard Eric's words, she was so surprised that she almost fell to the ground. However, the girl's mental fortitude was still good. When she heard that, she jumped up nimbly, opened the door of the Toyota car, and got into the front seat. Soon, she handed the Motorola mobile phone to Eric. She stared at Eric without blinking as he took out a business card from his pocket and dialed a number. "Hey Luke, it's me, Eric." After Luke Besson's call connected, Eric didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. "I'm still on the road, but my car broke down." No, of course not. I can handle it myself. I just happened to meet a little girl. I think she's very suitable for the role of Matilda. Maybe you can give the role to her. I'm serious. Hear you two talk." After saying that, Eric stuffed the mobile phone into Natalie's hands. Without saying anything else, he took out another cigarette and lit it up. He raised his chin at the girl. Natalie was stunned for 2 seconds with the mobile phone in her hand. She quickly put the phone to her ear and said, Hello, I'm Natalie Hirschler." Eric vaguely heard Luke Besson's self-introduction, and then the girl looked a little confused. However, after a brief moment of panic, Natalie had already calmed down. She took the initiative to say, "Hello, Director Besson. Although I still don't know what the role of Matilda is, I think I can give it a try. If you can give me an audition." "Oh, Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen, Fane Hotel on 10th Avenue. Yes, I'll remember it. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll be there on time. Thank you. Goodbye." After hanging up the phone, the girl seemed to be in disbelief. When she realized that it was all real, Natalie almost jumped up in excitement. Carefully returning the mobile phone to Eric, Natalie showed an eager expression. Mr. Williams, can you tell me more about the role of Matilda? Maybe I can prepare for it tonight. A precocious and rebellious little girl similar to you. Natalie wanted to refute that she was not rebellious at all. At most, she could only be considered naughty. However, she swallowed her words and asked, "Can you be more specific?" "That's enough." Eric smiled mysteriously. "What's yours will always be yours." Natalie was unwilling to give up and wanted to ask more questions, but Mrs. Hirschler, who had just left, drove back. As soon as the car stopped, the girl ran excitedly to her mother, waving her arms and legs as she told her the good news. Carter was taking out a toolbox from the white Chevrolet. When he heard the girl's words, he looked at Eric with interest and walked to the Toyota parked on the side of the road. "Mr. Williams, although it's a little presumptuous to say this, are you joking with Nat?" Eric handed Luke Besson's business card to Mrs. Hirschler and said, "This is the director's business card. Maybe it will be of some help to you." Mrs. Hirschler took the business card and looked at it. Since Eric said so, she no longer doubted the authenticity of what Eric had just said to her daughter. She just frowned slightly and said, "But Nat just started school. Won't filming affect her studies?" "Mom, it won't. It's probably just a small role. It won't take long." Mrs. Hirschler felt that her daughter's idea might be right. Just as her expression relaxed a little, Eric said, "It's not a small role, it's the female lead. If we really want to film it, it might take 2 to 3 months. "Wow." A surprised voice sounded. Mrs. Hirschler immediately frowned. "If that's the case, if Nat can get the role, the company will arrange a private tutor for her. Of course, it's all up to you. Then I'll need to discuss it with my husband." "Of course. However, the reason for this opportunity is that the original female lead had to withdraw from the cast this afternoon because of a sudden appendicitis. Because the cast has already started filming, it costs a lot of money every day, so it can't be delayed for too long for a role. It'll probably be confirmed in 2 or 3 days at most." Mom. Hearing this, Natalie immediately showed a pitiful expression and pulled her mother's sleeve. What should be done was done, so Eric didn't say anything more. Since he could meet Natalie on Long Island, which was thousands of miles away, Eric thought that Matilda would eventually belong to Natalie Portman. Sure enough, as Eric expected, the next day, Luke Besson called East Hampton and said that he was very satisfied with Natalie's performance. Although the girl's parents didn't agree with her after reading the script, they couldn't resist the girl's coaxing and pestering and finally agreed. The trip to Manhattan was like a small interlude in Eric's life as a stay-at-home dad in East Hampton. The following days were peaceful again. In the media, Jackson's case was still in an uproar and would probably continue for a few more months. If this kind of thing happened to Eric, he would definitely win the lawsuit at all costs because this was the best result. Moreover, the United States was a money society, which had a great advantage for a billionaire like Jackson. In Eric's memory, O.J. Simpson's wife killing case was the best proof of playing with the law under the influence of money. Unfortunately, although Jackson was brimming with talent, he was still a child at heart. He was surrounded by too many people who were bent on reaping benefits from him. This was also destined to be a tragedy for this genius. After a 3-week break, with the completion of Firefly Pictures' withdrawal plan from Fox, Eric had to start work again. After using a series of reasonable tax avoidance methods and paying the capital gains tax, Firefly finally received $650 million from News Corporation. Because Disney owned hundreds of Disney stores and Disney parks, Firefly Pictures' cash flow was far more abundant than the other major Hollywood film companies. Coupled with the huge profits from a series of hit movies, in 2 years, Firefly Pictures' cash reserves reached an astonishing $4 billion, which was more than 3 times the market value of MGM. After the summer release of Jurassic Park and a few other movies, this number would approach the $5 billion mark. In September, after a fierce competition, Firefly Pictures naturally lost to Viacom in the acquisition of the Blockbuster video store chain. Although they got the Blockbuster store chain, Lei Sherdong was still in a bad mood. Because of Firefly Pictures' intervention, the final acquisition price of Blockbuster, which could have been acquired for $8 billion, was increased by $600 million. After signing the acquisition agreement, Lei Sherdong also realized that Firefly Pictures did not really intend to bid for Blockbuster. The angry old man, who had spent $600 million for nothing, once again publicly ridiculed Firefly. After getting rid of the Fox network shares, under Katzenberg's leadership, Firefly began to slowly eat up ABC's shares in the circulation market. At this time, Firefly Pictures could no longer hide its real purpose. The company's senior management began to make contact with ABC, NBC, and CBS at the same time with great fanfare. After the news was made public, the stock prices of the three major TV stations began to rise at the same time, and the circulation of shares in the market became more frequent. Because of this, Firefly's secret acquisition of ABC's shares was not so obvious. During this period, Katzenberg submitted a plan to Eric. He intended to use several scattered shell companies to acquire about 10% of ABC's outstanding shares, then enter the ABC board of directors. He might have the right to speak, and at the same time, formally issue an acquisition invitation. In late September, Chris, who had been in Northern Europe for several months, finally returned to New York. The CEO of the Nokia Group, Yoma Alala, accompanied him. After Yoma Alala personally signed some documents with Eric, he talked with Eric for a few hours before leaving East Hampton in a hurry to return to Finland. Chris stood side by side on the road outside the manor in East Hampton and watched Yoma Alala's car disappear. Eric asked, "He doesn't seem to be in a good mood." "Of course, it's obvious." Chris showed a sly smile and walked side by side with Eric to the manor. He said, "I have to say we really got a great deal from this acquisition. You may not know, but just 5 days after we signed the equity transfer agreement, many member states of the European Union publicly announced the use of the GSM digital communication network instead of the original analog communication method. I was worried that the GSM network would be replaced by the digital network system developed by other large companies. Once the EU released this news, it basically confirmed that the GSM network was unshakable in Europe. Nokia's stock price rose 27% in the last week. You can imagine how those who sold their shares feel now. Yoma Alala originally didn't want the Bank of Finland shareholders to hand over their controlling shares, so he is so depressed now. Eric said with a smile. "Then you won't question my decision now, right?" "Of course," Chris said. "Eric, I found that your genius intuition is 100 times sharper than all the smart people I have met in the past 30 years. I'm really curious about what information you use to judge these things, such as the Gulf War, Nokia, and the series of successful films from Firefly Pictures. If I say I have talent in this, would you believe me?" Chris shook his head and said with a smile, "I don't believe it, but seeing is believing. I don't seem to have a second choice other than to believe it." Chapter 570. Back in the manor, Chris explained the series of operations for the Nokia Group acquisition to Eric in detail. Because Nokia's sales business will be more and more focused on overseas sales, we set up an international sales company in Ireland to collect all the sales revenue outside Finland. This way, we only need to pay about 10% income tax, and we can collect a large amount of money into the offshore fund in the Caribbean islands. In this way, Nokia's income tax can be maintained at about 10%. If we set up sales companies in European countries, the income tax rate will be at least 20%. When Eric heard this, he suddenly remembered the sandwich tax avoidance plan of international high-tech giants such as Apple and Google in his memory. Eric looked up at Chris, who had no intention of mentioning this. He thought about it, but in the end he didn't say it. After all, Chris and Yoma were definitely smart people, not to mention that every multinational group had a department specializing in tax avoidance strategies. If they could think of a cheaper tax avoidance plan, they would use it. If he suddenly set a series of plans to make use of Nokia's intellectual property rights and the zero tax loophole in the EU to achieve near zero income tax, it would be too out of line for a high school student like him who did not even go to university in this life. Chris also felt Eric's hesitation for a moment. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Chris continued. The 51% of Nokia shares we acquired are completely held by the Hawaiian Fund in the Caribbean islands. According to the current development situation, the business of the Nokia Group will achieve an explosive expansion in the next few years. The $420 million we injected can only support research and development and marketing costs for less than 2 years. According to your request, Nokia will once again launch a listing plan on the New York Stock Exchange in 1995, and we will control the shares. Chris suddenly raised his head and asked, Eric, I remember that when you invested in AOL, you also asked for AOL to be listed after 1995. Is there anything special about this time? Not only AOL, but also the browser software company, Yahoo Portal, and Hotmail online mail service, Firefly Software, and Digital Field Special Effects Company. I plan to list them separately in the 2 years after 1995. Eric was prepared for Chris's question. Although the reason given was not consistent with the facts in his memory, it was absolutely reasonable. Because 1995 is the 3rd year of Clinton's presidency, the Information Highway Plan implemented by the Clinton cabinet will begin to take effect in 1995. For technology companies, this is the best time to go public. If we miss this time, we can't predict what the next president will do if Clinton can't be re-elected. Chris nodded in agreement. The two discussed some more issues. Chris closed the document in front of him and said, Eric, do you really plan to buy Leslie Wexner's Ltd? Yes, I suddenly had some good ideas when I went to watch the fashion show at Bryant Park during the Fashion Week. It just so happens that the Victoria's Secret brand under Ltd can help me realize this plan. But Victoria's Secret is a lingerie brand, right? What I want is a lingerie brand. Relying on this brand, I plan to create a series of reality shows after Firefly has a TV station, and shape Victoria's Secret into a popular symbol. Isn't there Brighton Fashion Company? The two brands are not much different. Chris, a lingerie model with a sweet face and a hot body, or a fashion model with dull eyebrows like a plastic doll. Which one would you prefer? Chris smiled and said, then in this case, the investment company can't provide any help for the TV network acquisition plan in Los Angeles. By the way, when I came back yesterday, my former boss at Morgan Stanley, Mr. Hawkridge, called me and asked if Firefly Pictures would issue bonds. I didn't tell him anything. I just said that I would mention it to you. The TV network acquisition had just begun. Eric didn't expect that someone had already noticed this. He asked, which investment bank do you think is more suitable for Firefly's scale of securities lending? If you really do as you originally planned and issue bonds with a scale of tens of billions, any investment bank on Wall Street will fight to the death for this deal. However, if you want to get enough funds as soon as possible, I suggest that this business be divided among several investment banks. It's best to contact several European and Japanese investment banks. According to Firefly's credit rating, they will give a better commission rate. Eric recorded Chris's words on the memo next to him and said, I will talk to Los Angeles in the evening. Then let's talk about Ltd, Chris said. I learned about it yesterday. Ltd's current largest shareholder is Leslie Wexner. He owns about 35% of Ltd's shares. According to Ltd's recent stock price, the company's total market value is $1.47 billion. After the acquisition of the Nokia Group, the investment company only has $600 million left, which is only $100 million more than the market value of Leslie Wexner's shares. So if I want to acquire it, I need to use some despicable means commonly used on Wall Street. Eric noticed that Chris was obviously excited when he said the word despicable means. Obviously, as an investor from Morgan Stanley, Chris was still envious of those Wall Street tycoons who used leveraged buyouts to conquer the capital market. In the past, whether it was the acquisition of Cisco's shares or AOL's shares, even the recent acquisition of Nokia Group, Chris followed the normal business transaction process. Chris, I'll leave the $600 million to you. I won't participate in this matter. You just need to take down Ltd in the end. Give me 3 months, Chris stretched out 3 fingers. In addition, I also need Brighton Fashion Company as a bargaining chip for debt financing. After the acquisition, the two companies may directly merge. I said I'll leave this matter to you, Eric said with a smile. Chris, this time you can release the Wolf of Wall Street in your heart. I suddenly liked the name Wolf of Wall Street. When the two looked at each other and smiled, Emily pushed the door open and walked in. It was already dusk. Because they were so focused on the matter, the two forgot to turn on the lights. The room was very dark. Emily saw the two men sitting across the desk with a sinister smile on their faces at the same time, and couldn't help but shiver a little. She reached for the switch and turned on the lights. Emily breathed a sigh of relief. Hey gentlemen, although I don't want to disturb your secret plan, it's already 7 o'clock. Aren't you guys hungry? Honey, we'll go over now. Chris put away the documents in front of him. Eric also stood up and stretched his body that was a little stiff from sitting for too long. He walked with Emily to the dining room. While Chris went to the bathroom, Emily suddenly leaned over to Eric and said, Eric, have you guys discussed that matter? I've already given Chris full authority to handle it. You just have to wait to be the CEO of Ltd. Wow, thank you so much. Emily clenched her fist. In the dining room, Emily excitedly talked about a series of changes at Brighton Fashion Company. After the New York Fashion Week more than half a month ago, after a perfect marketing strategy, Brighton Fashion Company's brand awareness quickly spread across the United States and Europe. Although the clothes for the next season had not been officially released, the company's ready-to-wear sales and orders had greatly increased. A few days ago, that guy Leslie Wexney sent us an acquisition invitation. This time, he offered $450 million US. Haha. That old guy probably doesn't know that in a few months, his company will be acquired by us. Chris couldn't stand his girlfriend's threatening gestures and interrupted. Okay, honey, do you want everyone to know that we're going to maliciously acquire Ltd? Of course not, I'm not a fool. Do you think the people here will reveal this matter? Emily waved her small hand and said, Eric won't, Joan won't, and Eva won't either. Oh, and the two babies, Shashya, Kevin, you won't say anything either, right? Eric, who was sitting in the baby chair between Joanna and Emily, heard Emily talking to him. Kevin, on the other hand, just stared blankly at Emily, as if he couldn't be bothered to talk to this auntie. Eva, who came to scrounge for food again, saw the reactions of the two little fellows, and suddenly said to Eric, Eric, Kevin can't be, it can't be, right? He seems a little too slow. Joanna glared at her sister and said, Eva, don't talk nonsense. Eva stuck out her tongue and didn't continue the topic. Joanna's authority was much more important to her than Eric's. Although Chris and Emily didn't say anything, Joanna noticed that their eyes flashed with the same doubts as her sister's. She said softly, Vicky checked the little guy and even tested his IQ. There's no problem. The doctor said that it's because Xiaxia is too lively, which makes Kevin seem too quiet. It's good to be quiet. Maybe he'll grow up to be a philosopher, Chris said flatteringly. Joanna smiled and didn't say anything. She just looked at Eric. She knew very well what Virginia was thinking. Kevin was the eldest son of Eric, and Eric didn't treat the little guy as an illegitimate child. Therefore, Virginia hoped that Kevin could become the successor of Eric. If he really became a philosopher, Virginia would definitely be very sad. As long as the little guy can grow up happily, it's fine. He'll have to choose his own path in the future, Eric said, stroking his son's head. Emily opened her mouth, but didn't say anything. Everyone in the dining room, except for Eric, noticed Emily's small movement and fell silent for a moment. Chris was still worried that Emily would say something, so he gave his girlfriend a light kick. Everyone knew very well that Emily wanted to talk about how Eric planned to distribute his personal wealth in the future. However, this issue was a little too sensitive. After all, Eric wasn't even 30 years old now. Eric certainly knew what everyone was thinking. As a transmigrator with an Oriental soul, the inertia formed over thousands of years wasn't so easy to change. Eric was like the traditional Oriental people. He felt that it would be too sad if no one inherited such a big business in the end. However, Eric also knew that he would definitely not only have 2 children in the future, he would always find a successor to his business. However, although Eric wasn't like Lei Sherdong and Murdoch, who still held on to power in their 70s and 80s, causing their children to lack enough experience and ultimately unable to find a suitable successor. Even if Eric retired at the age of 50, it would be many years in the future. There was no point in thinking about these problems now. Early the next morning, Eric vaguely heard hurried footsteps. When he opened his eyes, he saw Eva waving a newspaper in his bedroom. Eric, Jurassic Park, has broken the box office record of E.T. It's $900 million worldwide. Eric facepalmed. Looking at the morning light outside the window, he couldn't help but wonder how his sister Joanna had more energy than him. Joanna also woke up. Seeing that Eva was so excited that she had completely forgotten where she was, Joanna felt a little helpless. She reached out and took the newspaper from Eva's hand. She picked up the pillow next to her and patted her little sister a few times. Eva, don't you know that it's rude to suddenly barge into someone's bedroom? If it happens again, I'll send you back to Poland. Although she knew that her sister was threatening her and wouldn't really send her back to Poland, Eva still shrank her neck. I just wanted to let you know the good news as soon as possible. Forget about sending me back to Poland. Maybe you can send me to Alaska. That kind of place is best for energetic people. Eric hugged Joanna's waist and gently rubbed the woman's fragrant body. He still sounded a little sleepy as he joked. Alaska? It's such a cold place. I'd rather go back to Poland. Shut up and get out, Joanna said again. After Eva was sent away, Eric was no longer sleepy. He sat up and opened the New York Times that Eva had just brought over. Chapter 571. Eric originally thought that the news of Jurassic Park breaking the global box office record would appear in the entertainment section. To his surprise, the New York Times actually published this news on the front page of the current affairs section. The photo was still the same Tyrannosaurus Rex that many newspapers used to mention Jurassic Park. From early June to now, after a 16-week screening, Jurassic Park broke the record of E.T. set in 1982 with a total box office of $890 million in North America and $470 million overseas for a total of $900 million. Although many professional box office analysts often mention the difference between 1982 and 1993, for ordinary people, the most intuitive numbers were often more eye-catching than those professional analysis. Therefore, the New York Times didn't exaggerate the impact of inflation. Although there was still a gap of $100 million from Eric's original estimate of a global box office of $1 billion, according to the current trend, although it would be difficult for the North American box office to surpass the $460 million record of Star Wars, it wouldn't be a problem to earn another $20 million in the next few months. The box office potential of Jurassic Park was still far from being tapped. Eric roughly browsed the box office data of the major countries published in the newspaper. At this time, the Japanese box office of Jurassic Park was only about $80 million. In his memory, the Japanese box office definitely exceeded $100 million, so according to the current trend, it was only a matter of time before the box office reached $1 billion worldwide. Except for some advertising cooperation, Firefly Pictures didn't have much contact with the owner of the New York Times, the Salzburg family. Therefore, he felt that the New York Times had no reason to publish the box office record-breaking news of Jurassic Park in the most important current affairs section. After reading the news on the entire page, Eric understood why the New York Times published the box office record-breaking news of Jurassic Park in the current affairs section of the newspaper. The New York Times, through several high-quality analysis articles on the front page, combined with the analysis of the impact of factors such as the global box office of Jurassic Park, the overseas box office growth rate of the 7 major Hollywood studios in recent years, and the brand-new General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, to be signed for the establishment of the WTO, the New York Times fully emphasized a very important message: the global rise of Hollywood. Joanna noticed that Eric was engrossed in reading the newspaper in his hand and frowned from time to time. She also curiously came over to look at the newspaper in Eric's hand. Eric propped his chin on the woman's head and sniffed the faint fragrance of her hair. He asked, "Did you see anything?" Joanna gently pressed her cheek against Eric's chest, feeling his strong heartbeat. She said reluctantly, "Are you going back to Los Angeles?" "No." Eric hugged Joanna's soft body and said, "The New York Times wouldn't brag about the rise of Hollywood for no reason. There must be someone behind it. Why don't you call Jeffrey and ask him? You'll know." Eric took a look at his watch. It was not 6 o'clock yet. It was 3 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. If he called them at this time, he would definitely be criticized. "I don't think it's the company's PR article. The box office potential of Jurassic Park in North America has almost been exhausted. Although it will be able to gain some box office in the next few months, according to the tiered sharing agreement, the company and the theater will share the profit ratio of 1:9 during this period. There is no need for marketing at all." Joanna reached out and stroked Eric's furrowed brows, as if to smooth out the fine lines there. She said, "I don't understand these things. Don't think so much every day. You will be tired. Why don't you sleep for a while?" "Forget it. It's time to get up." Eric put the newspaper aside and stopped thinking about this matter. In fact, this matter was not too complicated. The people who could benefit from today's news were most likely the manipulators behind the scenes. Because of the news that Jurassic Park broke the box office record, in the following days, related calls kept coming to the manor in East Hampton. Eric quickly figured out the reason why the New York Times published the news. On the day that the New York Times published the global box office record of Jurassic Park, after the opening of the New York Stock Exchange, the film and media stocks rose collectively. Even the stock prices of many film companies with good potential soared by 30%, reaching the daily limit of the New York Stock Exchange. Of course, most companies could only gain some benefits from the book value of their stocks. Because of the extreme instability of the film industry's profits, these benefits from stock appreciation were likely to suddenly evaporate one day in the future. But Paramount Communications, which was being bid by Viacom and QVC, could gain more direct benefits. In the following days, the stock price of Paramount Communications, the parent company of Paramount Pictures, rose by 17%. Since the news that Viacom and QVC were going to bid for Paramount Communications last year, the stock price of Paramount Communications had doubled in nearly a year. At this time, the market value of Paramount Communications was close to $9.5 billion. Eric remembered that in the original space-time, Lei Sherdong had spent $10 billion to buy Paramount Communications. But according to the current situation, whether it was Barry Diller or Lei Sherdong, it would not be so easy to buy Paramount Communications for $10 billion. During the call with Eric, Michael Lynn and others mentioned this matter with regret. If Firefly Pictures chose to go public, then Firefly Pictures would be the biggest beneficiary in this wave of media stocks rising collectively. But Eric did not think so. In his opinion, the stock price and the actual value of a company were two different concepts. Although the stock price often reflected the actual value of a company to a certain extent, most of the time, the stock price and the value of a company were not equal. For example, this time, if Firefly Pictures chose to go public, with the box office of Jurassic Park and other films in the summer, the stock price of Firefly Pictures would reach a new height. But this height was not necessarily equal to the actual value of Firefly Pictures. Unless the shareholders sold their shares at this time, they would not be able to gain too many benefits with the rise of the stock price. Moreover, Eric also talked with Chris about some things about the market value of Firefly Pictures. At this time, if Firefly Pictures chose to go public, the market value would certainly exceed $20 billion. But in Eric's mind, because of the golden finger of rebirth, the value of Firefly Pictures was more than $20 billion. At the same time, at the end of September, Fox TV officially broadcast Buffy the Vampire Slayer. With the viewership of the 4th season of The X-Files, which was at the peak of 20 million, the premiere episode of Buffy achieved more than 15 million viewers. Although this rating was not very good in 1993, and it might not even reach the top 10 ratings of the year, for Fox TV network, which had just experienced the withdrawal of shares from Firefly Pictures, it was very good news. This meant that Fox TV network really owned a popular TV series that was completely copyrighted. At the same time, because Jurassic Park broke the global box office record, the news of the media stocks, which had been fluctuating recently, finally stabilized. After the broadcast of Buffy, perhaps because of Murdoch's signal, or because of some other thoughts, Elizabeth, who was far away in Los Angeles, personally came to East Hampton to visit Eric. After greeting Joanna and the two little guys, Elizabeth came to Eric's study and said, "The scenery here is good. I will go back and look for a manor nearby." Looking at the girl unceremoniously occupying his place, Eric went to the small bar and made a cup of coffee. He said, "I also bought a few other places. If you are interested, the key is with Joan." Elizabeth flipped through the pile of documents on Eric's desk, looked up and rolled her eyes at him. "If you give it to me personally, I can reluctantly accept it. You actually want me to ask your woman for something. You are too insincere." "Then forget it. It's a few $1,000,000. I still feel bad about giving it to you. Bah, you bastard." Elizabeth lightly spat and waved the folder in her hand. Her eyes flashed with undisguised slyness. "These are TV drama proposals. Which one do you like? I'll help you take a look." Eric calmly poured 2 cups of coffee. He went to the desk and handed a cup to the girl. "We are now competitors. Seduction won't work on me." When he was preparing to buy the television network, Eric had Firefly's TV series department start looking for projects. The documents in Elizabeth's hand had been recently sent, and Eric hadn't had time to look at them. Only a ghost would want to seduce you. Elizabeth rolled her eyes at Eric. "Also, your vision isn't that good right now. Buffy's ratings are only 15 million. It's a lot worse than what I imagined." Eric pulled a chair and sat across from the desk. He held the coffee cup and smiled. "Are you overjoyed that there are 2 or 3 million more viewers?" Elizabeth seemed to choke, but she didn't refute. The TV series Buffy had 2 natural limitations. First, as a youth school drama, the audience was directly limited to teenagers. Second, the theme of the series was supernatural, which once again limited the audience who weren't interested in supernatural phenomena. With the 2 added together, 15 million viewers had exceeded Fox's expectations. Elizabeth saw that she was once again at a disadvantage in her habitual bickering with Eric. She had to divert her attention. She looked at the monitor on the desk and looked down. She found the computer and pressed the power button. Looking at the login screen on the monitor, Elizabeth rubbed her small hands and placed them on the keyboard. She asked, "Hey, what's the password?" Eric took a sip of coffee and said casually, "Hawaii." Elizabeth pursed her lips and entered the password. She didn't forget to tease him out of habit. "When your daughter grows up, she will be overjoyed by the name her father gave her. I think that when Emma grows up and finds out that she has a long family name, she will be even more surprised. Well, Emma always calls you Daddy. You've been in New York for so long, but you don't go back to see the little one. You're really irresponsible. I've always been curious. When Emma calls me, does she know what the word daddy means?" Elizabeth laughed twice and said, "I'm also very curious. Emma only calls you daddy. She doesn't have this kind of reaction to other men, women, cats, and dogs. It seems that you can be classified as a special species, a creature called daddy." TSK. Eric looked at the girl who didn't forget to type on the keyboard as she spoke. He quickly reminded her, "Don't mess up the files I saved. I've been learning for a year." Elizabeth lifted her chin and exclaimed, "Wow, why is your computer different from other people's? It's so big, a 1000 MB hard drive. How did you get it?" Although computer performance had begun to soar according to Moore's law, ordinary personal computers still only had 200 to 300 megabytes of storage space. Eric couldn't stand this, so he had a custom-made model. In fact, this kind of thing was very common in the future, and this kind of computer had a very copycat name, assembled computer. However, it was not so easy to assemble a personal computer at this time. To exceed the general performance limit, it could only be customized from the motherboard. "This is a custom-made version. If you're interested, I can give you a call," Eric explained and said, "Okay, stop messing around. Why did you suddenly come here? Tell me. Can't I just come to visit you? Now that you've seen it, Do you want me to personally send you off? Okay, seriously. Elizabeth typed a few times on the keyboard and said, "Didn't I become the vice president of 20th Century Fox? Then last week I got Mel Gibson's Braveheart project. The salary is US $18 million, plus a 10% share of the profits." As Elizabeth spoke, she saw Eric's solemn face and immediately became teary. "Is the price too high? Anyway, you have to help me. If this project fails, I'll definitely pack up and leave as the vice president." Eric asked helplessly, "What's the production budget you prepared?" Elizabeth said, including Mel Gibson's salary, it's a total of US $70 million. Eric sighed. "You should have told me in advance. The profit prospects of this project aren't too high. I'm interested in its Oscar potential. I think it should be able to win a few important Oscars, so I'm prepared to get it. Then what do we do now?" Chapter 572. Eric pondered for a moment, and suddenly remembered Elizabeth's competitive character, and his relationship with her. She would never have won the Braveheart project without telling him first. Then, thinking of a certain old fox, Eric said, "Liz, I suddenly feel that I shouldn't interfere in this matter. Once Braveheart loses money, and with the lesson learned from Throat Island a few years ago, Firefly Pictures will be much more competitive in the future when they compete with others for scripts." "Then you'll just watch me get kicked out of the company?" Eric shook his head. "No, I think your old man will be the one to leave." Elizabeth was silent for half a second and said bitterly, "Can you not be so smart?" Eric shook his head and sighed. "I can't help it. IQ is such a thing." Elizabeth looked at Eric's smug face. She raised the mouse in her hand as if she was about to throw it at him, but then she put it down. "Well, it's true that my dad personally discussed this project with Mel Gibson. So you shouldn't interfere. Your old man is too smart. If he doesn't change, he will sooner or later suffer the consequences." "Oh no, he already suffered the consequences of his own actions when he provoked that little girl Drew. Look at the stock price of your news corporation recently. If he were a human, he would have collapsed long ago." Elizabeth seemed a little helpless. "My old man is already 62 years old. Do you think he can still change?" "Okay." Eric spread his hands. "Then what benefits do I get from participating in this project?" "Firefly can participate in the investment." Elizabeth stretched out 5 white fingers. "Half is fine, but we have to keep the copyright." "I'm not investing. You set the price so high. Maybe Mel Gibson will take all the profits in the end." Eric immediately refused. "Then what do you think we should do?" Eric said nonchalantly. "Forget it, I'll be the good guy this time. Also, leave the female lead role for me." Elizabeth gave him a look of disdain. "Who is it this time? Don't tell me it's Joan's sister. I saw a photo of you two in the newspaper a few days ago." The thought of Eva gave Eric a headache. "Of course not. If I did anything to Eva, Joan would definitely bring Shasha back to Poland." Don't think that I don't know about the Spanish sisters. TSK. Be careful that you don't end up like Michael Jackson when you wake up." "Am I that kind of person? Monica is already 16. Besides, I didn't touch her." "What about Drew? When you two met, let me count. 1988, 1975. What a coincidence." "He's the same age as the boy in Michael Jackson's case." Eric narrowed his eyes. "Why don't we stop talking about Braveheart today, and focus on these questions?" Elizabeth immediately sat up straight and said seriously, "Okay, the female lead role is yours. What's next?" Eric recalled the script of Braveheart that he had read some time ago. It was not much different from what he remembered. The male and female leads were confirmed to be the original cast, and the production budget was sufficient. The quality of the movie was guaranteed. Now the only problem left was the distribution. "How do you plan to distribute this movie?" "My dad plans to make this movie the main movie of next year's summer." Elizabeth recalled what Eric had just said. "But now, according to what you said, shouldn't we release it at the end of the year?" "Yes. As for the production, I've read the script. There's no need to make any major changes. The male and female leads can be confirmed. As long as we pick a suitable producer and cooperate with Mel Gibson, the quality of the movie can be guaranteed. Now the only problem left is the distribution. Braveheart can be counted as an Olympic movie. If it's released during the summer, it won't be able to enjoy the box office bonus of the award season. So, it's best to release it at the end of the year. The so-called award season usually started at the end of the year and continued until the Oscars in March of the next year. During this period, there were countless film awards of various sizes. For an Olympic movie, every time it won an influential award during the award season, it would stimulate the movie's box office. After winning an important Oscar, the box office would usually rebound. Therefore, for a movie like Braveheart, which had the potential to win an important Oscar, it was best to release it at the end of the year. Elizabeth took out a notebook from her handbag and wrote down these things. Then she looked up and asked, "Anything else?" Eric tapped his fingers on the table and pondered for a moment. "I haven't heard anything about Wayne Stan's Miramax company. Have they found their next company?" "Not yet." Elizabeth thought for a while and said, "Aren't you not interested in Miramax?" "Just because I'm not interested doesn't mean that Miramax is worthless. Everyone knows how well Wayne Stan and his brother operate the Oscars. Right now the Oscars are still very profitable. So 20th Century Fox might as well buy Miramax and let them operate Braveheart." Elizabeth picked up a pen and was about to write it down when she suddenly said, "It seems that the brothers are asking for a very high price. Why don't we use the cooperation method of the Silence of the Lambs? Fox pays the money and they help with the public relations. Fox isn't willing to buy Miramax, but it doesn't mean that the other film companies aren't tempted. If they find a new company in the next year or so, do you think they'll still operate the Oscars for Fox? Maybe you'll become rivals then." "Looks like that's the only way." Elizabeth wrote down the plan and suddenly said, "The World War II film that Firefly is producing should also be competing for the Oscars, right? That Catherine Bigelow? That film will be released next summer." Catherine is a woman, so the chances of her winning Best Film and Best Director this time are not high. We'll fight for Best Actor then. On your side, Mel Gibson is the director and the male lead at the same time. He definitely can't win both Oscars, so you can focus on Best Director then. Elizabeth remembered some of the ridicule she received in the media after The Silence of the Lambs won Best Film. She understood that Eric was telling the truth. She said, "But Mel Gibson isn't a famous director. He should be more suitable to fight for Best Actor, right?" Eric nodded seriously. "Then we'll have to rely on our own abilities. No woman has ever won Best Director at the Oscars. With a little hype, we might be able to push Catherine up. A mainstream film like Saving Private Ryan has a very high chance of winning Best Film. Oh, there's also Tom Cruise. Mel Gibson is much more handsome than Tom. Under normal circumstances, it's not easy for handsome people to win Oscars. Okay, we won't fight for Best Actor." Elizabeth quickly surrendered and laughed. "If the Academy finds out that we're now discussing how to split the Oscars in 2 years, will they not give us any awards?" Eric lowered his voice. "Well, it's very likely. So don't go around talking nonsense when you go out." Elizabeth laughed foolishly. "Hey, is there anything else?" "That's all for now. I'll tell you when I remember." Elizabeth was about to close the notebook when she said, "Why don't you help take a look at the final editing of the film in the future?" "That's too much. I'm the boss of Firefly Pictures. Is it appropriate for me to work at your company as an editor?" Elizabeth stuffed the notebook into her bag disappointedly and said, "Don't think I don't know what you're thinking." "Oh, tell me about it, Mr. Williams. Then can you tell me why you suggested I work at Fox?" Eric laughed. "Don't tell me you're going to be the vice president of Warner?" Elizabeth ignored Eric and changed the subject. "You want me to take over my father's job, and then use me to expand your influence in Hollywood. That damned girl Drew accidentally revealed your ambition. I'll go along with your wishes. I want to see how you're going to unify Hollywood in the future." Eric was not in the mood to be embarrassed at being exposed. He held his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair. He said leisurely, "I promise you'll see that day. Then I'll be waiting." After Elizabeth said this, she picked up her bag and stood up. Eric also stood up and asked, "You're not going back to Los Angeles now, are you?" Elizabeth asked curiously, "Why should I go back to Los Angeles? Then where are you going?" "Of course I'm going home." Elizabeth rolled her eyes at Eric. "When I was 14, my father moved my family to Manhattan. Do you think my family is still in Australia?" Eric had really forgotten about this. "Then I'll send you back. Is your old man still in Los Angeles?" Elizabeth said, "He went to England. I think it's about Sky TV. I'm going home to see my mother." After sending Elizabeth off, Eric returned to the study. Just as he was about to call Sophie, he suddenly realized that French Rose had recently joined the cast of Grand Passion Rose. Eric did not have the contact information of the cast, so he could only put this matter aside for the time being. Since he had nothing else to do, Eric took the TV series proposals from Los Angeles and started reading them. After spending more than 2 hours going through more than a dozen proposals, Eric did not find any American TV series that had appeared in his memory. However, Eric still wrote down his own suggestions on a few seemingly good projects, intending to let the TV series department decide whether to invest in them. After all, the cost of a TV series was much lower than that of a movie. Moreover, according to the normal process, a TV series would usually only shoot a pilot to test the effect, so there would not be too much loss if it failed. After reading these documents, Eric was about to put them away when he suddenly saw the document that Elizabeth had just read. The woman flipped through it and casually placed it next to the monitor. Eric took the document and flipped through it casually. Although he did not have any expectations in his heart, when he saw the name of the project planner, Eric's pupils suddenly shrank. Because on the column there was a very familiar name, Michael Clayton. In the original space-time, he was the famous author of Jurassic Park. However, Eric had written Jurassic Park a few years earlier. Although Michael Clayton was still a good screenwriter in Hollywood, he was not as famous as he was in the original space-time. Looking at the TV series proposal in his hand, although he had not opened the content yet, based on his memory, Eric could almost guess what the TV series would be about. Emergency Room Story was the most popular medical TV series in the 1990s. Because of the high ratings of Emergency Room Story, in the following decade, it even led to the rise of a lot of medical TV series such as Grey's Anatomy and House. Not only did Emergency Room Story continuously produce more than 10 seasons, but it also made George Clooney, who was known as Hollywood's most eligible bachelor, popular. Eric flipped through the cover excitedly and roughly skimmed through the content of the TV series proposal. As Eric expected, the content was indeed Emergency Room Story. After briefly flipping through the proposal, Eric calmed down from his excitement. What he had to consider now was how to absolutely secure this project. A few months ago, he had just experienced the fight for Braveheart, and Eric did not want to experience it again. For the TV network that he would take over in the future, the value of Emergency Room Story was definitely not inferior to Friends. Moreover, this TV series had a very big advantage, which was that Emergency Room Story had a lot of protagonists. It could even be said that there were no protagonists. This meant that as long as Emergency Room Story had good ratings, it could continue to be filmed, and there would not be a situation where the production company could not afford to pay the actors and actresses. Because there were so many protagonists, it would not be a problem if any of them left. Thinking of this, Eric picked up the phone and directly called Michael Lynn, who was far away in Los Angeles. The two chatted on the phone for a long time. Michael Lynn felt Eric's serious attitude and said that he would personally follow up on this project. However, thinking of his previous experience, Eric reminded Michael Lynn not to be too conspicuous. After thinking about it, Eric looked at the pile of project proposals and finally suggested that Michael Lynn pick a few of them and let the copyright department come forward to take them down together. This way, it would not attract too many people's attention. After repeatedly reminding him, Eric finally felt relieved and hung up the phone. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.